Yes.
The lead Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to 1579 of the War News stream. And right now, we have news to break the internet right now that Russia has now halted completely all the gas cells in Crimea, and there is an active civil collapse happening right now on the Isle of Crimea, and it is literally, no exaggeration, one of the biggest things we've seen in the course of the war. We're also seeing massive attacks strike Russian frontline logistics, and also the Russian fire groups getting destroyed left and right, and also large explosions are being reported across Russia this evening amidst a brand new attack on Moscow. And it's good to see you all once again.
And, of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news from around the world in the midst of an amazing Sunday night fundraiser for Nova Ukraine, as we have been able to hear that the armed forces of Ukraine have been able to cause enough damage, significant enough, irreparable enough, that the Crimean Peninsula's entire supply structure has collapsed today, and the civil administration of Crimea appears to be in a state of freefall, as all supplies across the Kerch Strait, the Armyansk and Chandar gaps, and elsewhere have completely ended as of today. Effective 9 a.m. local time in Crimea, the local authorities under the occupational forces have announced that all fuel sales will be stopped indefinitely throughout the peninsula due to the complete lack of fuel. Prices inside of the occupied regions are skyrocketing and are now reaching today nearly $9 and $10 a gallon at most gas stations throughout Zaporizhia, Kherson, Donetsk, and Luhansk inside the occupied regions. Supply lines are collapsing so badly in Crimea that citizens cannot even board trains and leave the oblast over the usable railway bridge in Kerch because there is no fuel to be able to refuel the trains, bringing them back and into Russia. At the same time, we've also been able to hear that Ukrainian armed forces have been conducting more significant attacks against the peninsula overnight, and did successfully hit and destroy one of the few ferry boats that exist within the Kerch Strait, ferrying equipment from Kavkaz to Kerch last night, meaning that one of the last ferry axes into the area of Crimea has also been destroyed as well. Once again, meaning that the situation in Crimea has reached a historical level at which we have not seen since the Second World War, with the siege of Crimea and the siege of Sevastopol during 1941. We have also been able to see other significant developments throughout the Russian Federation as well, as right now the city of Moscow is under another drone attack for the 4th or 5th day in a row, as Ukrainian drones have once again made it into the Moscow air defense perimeter. At the moment, Russian air defenses are still being built up within the city in a desperate bid to stop more Ukrainian drones from causing even further extreme damage within the city to its critical infrastructure and vital industries. We've also been able to see that explosions inside of Tver have been caused, and gas prices are also rapidly skyrocketing in other regions close to Moscow. We've also been able to report of explosions within Bryansk, and the fact that Eastern Orthodox priests are now blessing the diesel down in Krasnodar. There's even been further news coming out of the Middle East, as we have seen that the US and Iran are currently involved in negotiations in Switzerland. At the moment, the President of the United States threatened the Iranians earlier today that he was going to wipe them out before they could even make it back to Iran, which made them stop the talks, and they got up and walked away. And now it appears that talks may have restarted in a modest form at this point, and we have been able to achieve a major diplomatic breakthrough, and that everybody there has agreed that the memorandum of understanding is in fact what they're talking about. So we do know that major gains have been made in the negotiating table inside of Switzerland so far by the U.S. delegation today. We've also been able to see that additionally other statements have been made within the Middle East, and there's also been a UK MTO reported incident off of the southern coast of Yemen, while at the same time Hezbollah has made it clear that they will continue an armed resistance against Israel into the indefinite future, and a major explosion occurred today in the area of Qatar for largely interesting reasons that were not affiliated with an Iranian attack. We've also been able to see the Ukrainian armed forces have been inflicting significant losses onto Russian frontline forces over the course of this day, and the Russian Federation's forces have not been able to advance a single inch over the course of the day from what we can tell. We have quite a significant amount of news to cover tonight, and we're going to be making sure to get through this news, starting with our largest stories first, and then moving our way on down into the smaller stories throughout the night. But it is one hell of a thing to say, folks, that today we can confirm that Crimea has largely fallen to the Ukrainian supply destruction that has been seen so far. But before we get on into that major news, we actually have breaking news that's coming out live on air. So Matthew, what do we got?
Okay, so a little bit of breaking news just to start the night off strong right now. We are tracking the active attack on Moscow right this minute. It is believed to be that at least 100 or so Ukrainian drones are entering the Moscow region right now. We are getting video showing a couple of them going right for the Russian capital. We don't know what the target is just yet. We have seen at least one shot down so far by Russian outer perimeter defenses, but it looks like a good number are still making their way through toward the capital city itself. So we'll be probably seeing about halfway through the stream tonight what it's going to be hitting. So that will be interesting. But here's the first video we have of the Moscow attack.
But look, behold, it's an FP1.
Very calmly flying in, by the way. One of the more slower variants, and as you can see, no issues really much at all.
A very relaxed sort of an attack the Ukrainians just conducted casually, as they do most attacks inside the Russian Federation. But with that out of the way, and showing us that there is still ongoing drones flying into the Moscow air defense perimeter, it is time for us to get on into our major breaking news of the day. And I bet y'all can probably hear the smile on my face through the microphone right now, because I gotta tell y'all that today's news is a special kind of news, a news that y'all might not ever hear again. Not that it's a bad thing, it's an incredibly good thing, but a good thing like this only comes around once in a while, and inside of Crimea today, the situation is completely collapsed. Don't listen to my words about it, listen to the announcement of the Crimean occupational government in their announcement today, which I'll make sure to read to y'all in the subtitles below, and I'll let a little of the audio bleed through so y'all can hear the voice of the occupational authorities when they made this announcement this morning. Dear Crimeans, from 9 a.m. at Crimean gas stations, the sale of fuel for cashless payments, and vouchers to legal and physical entities will be discontinued. Fuel will be supplied only to state services that ensure the vital functions and security of the Republic of Crimea. Any further decisions regarding the operating mode of gas stations will be announced additionally. I ask everyone to remain calm and be guided only by official sources. This is the
That's kind of a strange announcement to make, isn't it? Because basically what he said there, cutting through all the nice talk to make it sound nice and fluffy with the statement he just made, he basically said, Russian civilians, screw you bastards. All that gasoline that you needed to escape Crimea, it's all going to the Russian military. It's not getting to your hands. It's going to the military. Screw the rest of you. You're on your own.
He just basically said, my dear Russian citizens in Crimea, I hope y'all burn in hell like live in piss. Y'all are on your own. Signed, the Crimean occupational government. A very interesting sort of an announcement, to say the least. We also were able to get further corroboration that these fuel cells have been suspended, as Flytuk's network did summarize that Russian authorities have suspended all fuel cells to the general public in Crimea as of 9 a.m. today, following overnight Ukrainian strikes on key port and oil infrastructure. Supplies are now restricted exclusively to emergency and security services to maintain critical operations. And a final bit of news here that we did get. This is a statement from a Russian military blogger in Crimea about the situation as it exists right now on the civilian side. In Crimea, they have asked to disconnect all excess electrical appliances from the network. Due to a lack of electricity, pumping stations have stopped working. Water is temporarily not being supplied. Traffic across the ferry crossing in the Kerch area has been halted following the attack on the ferry, the one ferry they had. Fuel tankers are being asked to return to the R280 highway, aka the M14, which is the highway to hell, I believe as we call it. I think some serious statements and actions from Moscow are imminent. Continued silence will look completely inappropriate. And we can't do without Peskov's briefing and Rakol's lamentations either, nor Zakharova's statements, which are all the Russian propagandists and Kremlin spokespeople, which they're talking about right here. And we're seeing that clearly they're going to say something grandiose and it'll end up amounting to absolutely nothing. The situation for fuel has gotten so bad that rolling blackouts are now being reported within the city of Sevastopol, and this outage map here is actually showing some of the substation grid areas that have actually been affected so badly that large parts of the city have been directly taken off of the power grid, and they are currently suffering from blackouts. We understand that 68% of the city's population today was without electricity for almost the entirety of the day due to the power outages that are now starting to grip the entirety of the peninsula. This is also a story that's being repeated in every city inside of Crimea right now, but Sevastopol is the one that we got the most verifiable information of to be able to give exact statistics and a map to be able to depict how bad the shortages are currently. The shortages are even so bad that diesel in any amount to supply the passenger trains of the Russian state railways can no longer even be provided to passenger trains in Simferopol. As many people will know, gas stations as of this morning have been completely closed for civilians to be able to buy gas for any reasons. This means that if you do not have gas for your car, the only option that you have left to be able to leave Crimea is to go to a Russian railway station in Simferopol, Sevastopol, or any other smaller town within Crimea and attempt to try and get on the next train out of the area. The railway bridge at the Kerch Strait is still intact and operational, and passenger trains do routinely travel from Sevastopol and Simferopol all the way back into the Russian Federation to the city of Krasnodar and beyond to Rostov and even further on east. Many citizens of the Russian Federation that are attempting to leave today did decide to make their final few gallons of gas in their cars worthwhile and drive to the train station inside of the city of Simferopol to see if they could board the next train heading anywhere but Crimea. And even that is going to be impossible. I'll let y'all hear it right here. This girl is stating, and crying actually, that all of the trains in Simferopol have been suspended because there are no longer any fuel trucks or fuel resources to count on within the area to be able to even keep the trains running to get people out of Crimea and back into Russia. And so this girl is absolutely breaking down literally right outside the train station with a train pulled up to the platform, mind you, that doesn't even have fuel to leave.
Yeah, every time I get distraught about stuff in my life, the first thing I do is flip on my phone camera and start recording myself crying about it. That's the first thing I do every time. I have to let other people see me crying about whatever's going wrong. So they're so distraught, by the way. Also, by the way, what's up with these theatrics? It's like y'all waited until Ukraine started literally devastating the entire Isle of Crimea to start trying to get on trains to leave. It's like you've been on stolen land for years at this point, and now you saw things going sideways. You waited to the last minute, and now you want to cry and bitch about it. It's like, boo-hoo.
Oh my god, my dog died. Record. Like, it's like, man, it's like, you can't make that kind of stuff. It's like, also, why in the world do people have to film themselves when they're, like, going through a tragic moment? Generally, folks, my rule is that if I'm having, like, a tragic moment in my life, I generally don't flip on record and start filming it. That's just my rule. But, maybe other people live their lives more avant-garde, possibly, like that person. Outside of that, we did get to see the Ukrainian drones were still attacking the Crimean peninsula overnight in this clip here. But before we get to it, just to tease that one for y'all, because we'll be getting to that here in just a moment, we were able to see that outside of that area in Kerch, we are getting the real reason why everything absolutely collapsed overnight, basically, in the whole of the Crimean Peninsula. As many of y'all will know, an attack was conducted by Ukrainian drone forces against the whole of the peninsula yesterday, with a specific focus being directed against the city of Kerch within the Kerch Strait. As many of y'all will know, we did get to see that the fuel depot inside of Kerch Port appears to have been hit and burned to the ground last night in that attack. That's that fuel depot right here. One thing that we didn't know, however, is that the only ferry left that can actually moor at this dock to offload cars or rail cars into Crimea to try and keep the supply lines running was also destroyed last night, apparently in that attack. There is actually a picture, we believe, of that ferry burning at its mooring right there inside of the port. And to show you all the ferry itself, this was the last ferry that they had between Kacha, Kavkaz over on the Russian mainland side of the strait, and the one that would make it to the port of Kerch. I don't know why in the world I'm having such a hard time saying that. But beyond that, the Russian ferry Panagia was struck at the Kerch ferry crossing in Russia's Krasnodar region. The attack also sparked a fire at the Chushka oil terminal. Strikes on the Kerch ferry crossing are particularly significant, as it has become a key route for fuel supplies into Crimea after repeated attacks on Russia's land corridor. This was the last operational ferry to Crimea. It is now gone from what we know. So if any of y'all have any respects to give to the ferry, like, rest in piss or something like that, you can give it right now, because this is the last time you're ever going to hear of this ferry.
Yeah, really. I'll tell you what. And also, I see like two people in the chat. They're like, guys, don't be cruel to civilians. Listen, I'm not wishing any harm on civilians, by the way. I hope they get out safely. But all I'm saying is the crying and the theatrics is completely unwarranted, considering that they've known what the situation is in Crimea for a super long time. They waited too long to try to leave, and now they're stuck, and now they want to cry about it. So I don't have any sympathy for stupidity. That's the problem where I'm sort of having with this. But yeah, though, also rest in peace to this little ferry boat right here. That was one of the last few they had, by the way. They knocked out several today.
Yeah, they actually did. They did a lot of damage. I'll say this, though, folks. My 2 cents on it, where I don't have sympathy for the Russian civilians, is that they're going into on a vacation in an active war zone. And generally, folks, whenever I think of things like with my brain, usually the last place I ever pick for a vacation is like, oh yeah, let me go onto the front lines in Burma and see if I can get shot up by the junta. Maybe that's a good place for a vacation. If I got shot there, I don't expect any tears from anybody that I went into the middle of civil war land, which is Burma, and got shot in the middle of the front lines between the pro-government forces and the military junta. That wouldn't really make a whole lot of sense. Or that'd be like, for example, going to Syria and getting beheaded by ISIS and then expecting a tear to be shed when literally right now they tell you don't travel to Syria because it's highly dangerous and unstable. So generally when I use common sense, the last place I would say that I give anybody any sympathy for an unfortunate tragedy would be Russian citizens traveling into an active war zone to go hang out on a beach. Like, you don't see me, like, I just gotta say, folks, to add a little bit of common sense to the whole thing, you didn't really see a lot of Americans hanging out on the beaches of Vietnam for their summer vacation back in the Vietnam War. You know what I mean? Like, that's a little stupid to do. And so that's why I'm saying I'm not really giving a lot of sympathy, because you want want to go TikTok influencing on some beach, maybe go somewhere that isn't in the middle of an active war zone. Maybe. And maybe don't hang out so long that you can't leave when already there are fuel restrictions and rations in Crimea that have been in place for weeks that are showing that the situation is already extremely unstable. That's my 2 cents on it. So if people don't like that, that's unfortunate, but I usually work with common sense, and when people work outside of their common sense, I don't really give them much sympathy. Moving us on out of that and back into the Kerch city area, we did also get to see that burning oil depot inside the port here in this clip. He's riding by the railroad tracks. You know, they're very vacant, though. You know, it's not really like there's any trains being run over them.
Yeah, I wonder why that is. It might be a little dangerous.
Well, I actually heard, Matthew, that the Russians had to clear out all of these railways out there in Crimea because apparently they said that the Russian railways weren't able to find the time to run a train because the Ukrainians were running a train on them. Kind of crazy, really. But we also got another...
Also, you do have the clip of the all the ferries on fire, like the 3 ferries out there in the strait. You do have that video?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we got
Okay,
that.
making sure.
We're about to get to that here very soon. There's one of the drones coming in this morning.
Oh, man. Oh, look at all these trucks.
Oh.
Oh my. Also, notice an observation here. You heard all the machine gun fire, but you didn't hear any missile-based air defenses firing off at the same time. So I think that S-400 that Ukraine took out about, 10 hours ago last night, I think that was their single missile-based air defense they had around Kerch.
I think it was. I don't think they have any left. In the meantime, we also did get to see some more clips of the explosions in Kerch. Take a little gander here. This guy got a real kick out of it.
Really? He enjoyed this a little too much.
Yeah, he needs to calm it down a little. I think this guy might have arson in his future. We've also been able to hear that massive power outages have been recorded in Kerch and Feodosia, showing that the power blackouts throughout the whole region are becoming widespread. We also have some additional clips as well of the strike on Kavkaz port. Y'all want to see it? Let's take a look. Is this the clip that you were speaking of, Matthew, earlier?
It could be.
All right. Here's the clip. Oh, I hear it. Oh, there it is. Coming in real gentle like. Well, finally some... Oh! They got that one.
Yeah, gone. And that is not the clip, by the way. So if you don't have it, I just put it in the likes tab, by the way. We got to make sure to show people that one. That's a huge one.
Yeah, we'll have to get that one. I'm not sure if I actually have it at this point. And no, actually, I don't have that one because I thought it was a duplicate. Funnily enough.
Dang, man. So, we can't miss that one, man. You got to jump to that one pretty quick. I was wondering why he didn't show it during the ferry thing during earlier. I was like, hopefully he has that. It's a huge one.
Let me get to it real quick because I actually didn't put this one down. This one actually shows several of the ferries that were attempting to cross the strait on fire and burning in the strait this morning. There's all of them burning in the middle of the strait, right next to the oil fire that's on the coast.
That picture that you saw, that ferry earlier that we just showed at the beginning of the stream, that was one of the ferries that you just saw in this video right here burning out there in the Kerch Strait. But this was a big deal because they have very few crossing ferries, like these ferry boats that are dedicated for semi-trucks. Because you can't send the semi-trucks across the Kerch Bridge because if you send those trucks across it, it violates the weight restriction and you'll damage the bridge or you'll collapse it. And some spots that are damaged on the Kerch Bridge. So what they had to do is send those semi-trucks across on the ferry boats, and as you can see, they're now burning and sinking in the Kerch Strait. So that's not good for logistics.
Oh, not good for logistics at all, as many of y'all will know. Generally, boats have to float, and if they're sitting at the bottom of the sea, they aren't really doing their job at being a boat. Now, if they were trying to make a submarine, that'd be a different story. But sadly, these things really aren't watertight, so they don't really do that good at being submarines either. So the Russians are kind of running into a bit of a problem. All these little ferries like that one right here and this one right there, they're no longer around, at least as of today, so the Russians have decided to give a little announcement. From June 21st, ferry services across the Kerch Strait will be temporarily suspended. Only temporary.
I wonder why it's temporarily suspended. It must just be a small outage.
I'm sure it's nothing that big, it's probably nothing major at all. It's not like there's literally 4 different ferries on fire right now in the middle of the strait that got blown up. I'm sure it's only a small comeuppance, a minor technical glitch. They'll have it all running tomorrow, I'm sure. But since heavy-duty vehicles are prohibited from crossing the Crimean Bridge, drivers must choose an alternative overland route, the R280 highway, via Rostov-on-Don to Melitopol. Oh, they're sending them on the highway to hell. Oh, man, you can't make this up. And they're out of fuel down in Krasnodar. So there's no way for them to even refuel to drive all the way back around to get on the M14 to go to Melitopol.
Man, they're honestly like, this is like, we're not saying this just for the like shock value of it. The Russian instructions of this detour is literally sending the Russian truckers to their death. It literally is almost a guaranteed death. If the Ukrainian drones don't get them, they're going to run out of fuel and be stranded, and they're going to be stuck in enemy territory. So, I mean, this is literally a mission of death that the Russians are telling their own truckers to go on.
It really is. And you know what's even crazier? There's no way to even get into Crimea that we know of right now. The Armyansk and Chonhar bridges have been destroyed, even with the Henichest bridges, which have also been destroyed, and the pontoon bridges were hit as well. So even if they drive to Melitopol, there's no way to even get into Crimea from there. So they end up making that whole journey around the Azov Sea, literally, all the way to Crimea for no reason. They can't even get into Crimea from there. So the situation is absolutely screwed. There's no way to get supplies into Crimea. It's completely isolated at this point. And the fact that we see that passenger trains and trains in general are no longer running in Crimea either, we can generally make a safe assumption that the Russians are not using the railway bridge for freight. Otherwise, fuel and supplies would be getting in to some extent, but we're not even seeing that. So that's giving us a clear idea at this point that Crimea is quite literally supply isolated completely, and that's also why we're seeing that everything is shutting down in Crimea basically effective today. While everything's shutting down, many Russians who have overstayed their welcome in the peninsula have decided to cut their vacation short and try and go back across the Crimean Bridge. There's but one problem. There is no way out. This is what they're watching right now as they try and get on the bridge. There's about 1,000 cars right now on the peninsula side of the bridge entrance trying to make the crossing right now, and the Russian occupational authorities are only letting a few over at a time.
Там попали, по-моему, в нефтебазу какую-то или что, просто всю ночь. Огонь.
I wonder how those buses are going to get over considering the weight limitation.
Yeah, I really honestly don't know, really. They probably won't get across.
Probably not. A little unfortunate for him.
Пробка там миллионная опять.
Yes. A kilometers long traffic jam trying to get across the bridge right there. That seems like a really bad idea to get in that line, because once you get stuck in that gridlock, you can't get out of it. And then if you run your car too long to stay cool with your air conditioner, then you're going to run out of gas and not be able to get any more. Really a catch-22.
Man, what do you mean you won't be able to get any gas? There's plenty of gas. You just got to inhale it from the air.
Man, I tell you.
I mean, it's right there. I mean, like, it's literally covering the whole entrance of the bridge. Right here. This is what the oil fire in the oil storage depot in Kerch looks like right now. It's literally covering the entrance to the bridge. So, I mean, I guess if they're running out of gas, they could just, like, suck in some of the fresh air from outside and, like, spit it into the tank. There's a little bit of oil in that. Or at least they'll be able to keep the engines lubricated with the oil up in the air right now. That's another way to look at it. Yeah, when life gives you lemons, folks, make lemonade. And we also got to see another picture of everyone trying to leave, and it's not looking all too good. It's looking pretty sad. I gotta tell y'all, folks, it's just rough down there. And many Russians, they have decided to try and come up with ways to deal with this crisis that we're seeing right now. But before we get on over to how they're actually trying to deal with it, I have to get y'all through the rest of the crisis as it exists right now. How absurd and rude of me to just try and skip past all this. We have to make sure to really cover it in depth. Let me get y'all into some more news that we got out of Feodosia. This is the remains of the fuel depot in Feodosia, which largely was destroyed. And we also hear this guy is absolutely just jamming out as he's driving by this. He's apparently using his last gallons of gas to film this.
Yeah, good for him. We need to see this damage right here, and it looks like it's definitely burned out. Although I think we could definitely tell from the massive, like apocalyptic smoke clouds that something was burning here. But it's good to see it on the ground.
We have to make sure. We have to just doubly make sure. And it does look
This was
destroyed.
enough oil. This was enough oil burning right here to create an entirely new weather system of oil rain in this area.
Man, oil rain is a common weather element in Russia these days. A lot of people said that climate change wasn't real. I disagree. Like the oil in the rain it's interesting. But moving us on from that and on out of that little clip, we've also been able to see that further on north, the Russians are trying to protect the convoys in Crimea with the convoy escorts of the very little supplies of any type that they have left. Mm-mm-mm.
Are you sure this is Crimea? I thought this was the occupied territories.
This is actually, this one was in Crimea. There's another one from the M14, but there's actually two
Okay.
similar clips from different locations. But would you look at that, please?
Yeah, that's right. Here's not going to work. We've said this before. I think we predicted this about 4 or 5 days ago that putting a dude with a machine gun in a truck is not going to be protecting these logistics convoys.
Oh, we're gonna get around to how little that works. Like, we're really gonna get around to how little that's actually working here very soon. But one more thing. There was an explosion in Armyansk. Пиздец. Пиздец, иди нахуй, блядь. Get him, boy! Oh! They got him. Let's take another look. Looks to be something in central Armyan. Sadly, we can't tell exactly
Man,
what.
this is Bryansk, I believe. I think that was a video of Bryansk.
Bryansk.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Well, explosion in Armyansk, Crimea.
That's more from Bryansk.
And explosions in Armyansk. The second line right below that one.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That second clip, I think, is from Bryansk.
I think so, but the first one was from Armyansk. I had to make sure because you said Bryansk. I was like, Bryansk? The hell? I was like, man, I'm pretty sure that's from Armyansk. But anyways, moving us on from that clip, we also were able to see an amalgamation of clips made by the Ukrainian long-range unmanned systems forces striking and destroying Russian targets inside of Crimea last night. Let's take a little look. Actually, you know what? While we take a look at this and just show you all the compilation of destruction from last night's attack, a lot of people are talking about the situation in Crimea right now. And as the Russians are trying to flee, many people are putting in their thoughts and prayers for those folks. And so, Andy, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so we did see all the videos and the pictures showing the Russian civilians lining up at the Kerch bridge and also trying to go line up at the train stations, trying to flee Crimea all at the last minute now that things are going sideways. And the thing that got them to start fleeing today is because the Crimean government in the area, the occupation government, announced they will no longer sell any gas into any civilians in Crimea. They're going to save all the gas for the military so that way they can fight Ukraine and screw the civilians. Also, the water and electricity are also out today as well. Running water is not available in several areas of Crimea today. And also, there's been major electrical outages, not just in areas of Crimea, but also mainly around the naval port of Sebastopol. I don't think we've gotten to that post yet either, but there's a huge electrical outlet there happening as well. So what are your thoughts about that? 62% said Russian civilians are officially stuck, while 21% said Ukraine will help them get out, and 8% said it's not as bad as it seems. And I'm with the 60%. I think Russian civilians are officially stuck at this point. They have no gas. They have no even method to leave the area. The only way out is the Crimean bridge. The ferry boats are now destroyed for the most part. So unless they're able to hoard across that bridge, then they are not getting out. Unless they want to take their luck going through the occupied Ukrainian territories, which is also known as the Highway of Death, then there's no way for them to leave. So I'll be honest, I'm not sure what those civilians are going to do there. I think they're just going to have to bunker down and hope for the best from the looks of it. But Enforcer, what say you?
Well, I hope they get schwemmers because there's no way across the bridge. There's no way across by ferry. The only way is schwemmen. And also, there's really no way across through the occupied land bridge either because there's no way to get to it via any bridges there either. So they're just going to have to hoof it or they're going to have to be good at schwemmen. But outside that, I'll be with 62%. I think the Russians are officially stuck at this point inside of Crimea. And I also say that the situation is probably going to soon become hopeless for the Russian military as well, considering how far stretched the fuel resources are peninsula-wide inside of Crimea. So I would be well within the 62%. In the meantime, we can actually see the Ukrainians continuing to target and destroy Russian supply trucks and also critical infrastructure in Crimea and the occupied land bridge. We can even see them here showing the fire in Kerch, which we already showed you all previously. Excuse me. Goodness. A little something in the throat there. We can also see one of the strikes in I believe that would be Kerch. Another little fire there. They've been doing hard work.
Also, by the way, I see Ulf Hednar said, would Ukraine agree to help aid Crimea if they agree to renounce Russia, like basically start a mob and kick out the occupation authorities? I would not rule that out because Ukraine is not a monster of a country, by the way. Now, if it was Russia, I would have some doubts about that. But Ukraine would have sympathy on the civilians that are left there. The Ukraine's goal here is not to hurt civilians, it's to simply kick the Russian military out. That's their main goal, so that way they can retake Crimea. So I think that they would offer some sort of quid pro quo like that to help the Crimean Russian civilians out, to get them out of the area, because ultimately, I'm sure Ukraine wants to get the Russians back into mainland Russia. They don't want them to stay in Ukrainian territory. So I imagine they probably would.
I imagine they probably would as well. We'll have to see how it goes, though, because there ain't really a lot of ways to get folks out of Crimea right now, so I guess they'll have to start getting a little creative. Coming up with some imagination, maybe. But those fires in Crimea sure are looking quite nice. But moving us on out of all that news inside of Crimea, some Russians have decided that they will fix the problem, and they will bring back the fuel. And we have been able to see that the gas is being blessed down in Krasnodar as a result. I wonder if that's going to bring back the gas.
We're going to give them some gasolina. Give them some gasolina.
Give them some gasolina.
But really, though, let's be honest here. Are these guys priests? They may or may not be. I'm not totally sure. They might be. But at first, I thought they're out here cleaning the gas pumps. They have the brush in their hand. I thought they're out here, like, knocking off the dirt from it or something like that. But I guess they're out here trying to do the rain dance and bring back the gasoline. But I think they're in the wrong place. They need to go to the Kremlin and ask for that to be reversed. That's who they need to go be asking about that. So, maybe they'll get some gasolina, but I'm not totally sure about that.
Man, this would be like them showing up to like a supermarket, like at an empty bread aisle, and be like, please give us some bread and whole wheat. Man, it's like, what the hell is this going to achieve? It's like, this is a gas pump, you fool. It's like the gas doesn't come out of the ground.
Can we hear this one more time? I got to hear the gasolina chant.
Wait a minute, he literally said, give us gas for our automobiles. Did you hear that? He said, like it's something, benzene for automobile. Man, he literally said gas for the car. Oh my God, listen to it again. You can hear it clearly.
Hey, he did.
Oh my God, it's literally the prayer.
Man, he literally said, give us gasoline for our cars in the middle of that right there. That's crazy work.
Man, I always remember, folks, that old American psalm. I believe it's let's see, it's I think it's in, what is it, Shakey 13.8. Blessed be the oils from the lands of Arabia or something like that. There's a chant for it and everything. But crazily enough, these guys have come up with a whole song and a chant and a prayer apparently for gasoline for the car. Literally, that's what he said. So, I mean, that's unbelievable, really. And they repeat it. That's a chorus. It's unbelievable.
Also, by the way, like, what's the significance of the broom or the brush? Like, what is that? Does that mean something? Like in the Orthodoxy church or something? What does that mean?
I don't really know what it means, but it's like they have this across the Eastern Orthodox faith. They like dip it in holy water and they kind of like flick it over people's heads to bless them with the holy water. It's I don't know the exact ritual involved with it, but that is a fairly normal part of Eastern Orthodox churches and the Russian Orthodox one particularly. They're really big on that.
But isn't that meant for, like, flicking on the people? Like, it's not meant for, like, flicking on the gasoline nozzle or the pump. It's like, isn't that intended, like, holy water to bless the people?
Well, I mean, many things have been blessed by, like, priests of the Eastern Orthodox faith. I mean, I think at one time I've seen, like, Russian fighter aircraft being blessed with the holy water and the little, like, broom-looking thing. I don't know the name of that specifically. But let me see if I can, let's see. Russia blesses jet. Let me see if I can find a picture. Oh yeah, here we are. Like, here they are, like, in another place, actually blessing, I think it's an Su-34, like, slinging holy water into the intakes of the jet engines, It's like, They do this like quite often. The Japanese actually blessed an F-35, but they did it by their own Shinto traditions. But yeah, the Russians do this quite commonly for a lot of stuff. Like they bless tanks and everything as well.
Interesting. That's very fascinating right there. I don't think it worked because I think the plane got shot down.
Nah, it really didn't work. It's also not really working here to get the gas back at the pump. So I think this whole thing is generally, kind of not really going all too well for him, But I gotta say, man, the whole Channing thing, this is insane. Like, I would never believe they'd actually unironically do something like that. It's like I don't really think that anyone, like any god, would ever help with bringing back gasoline. It's like that's more of a man-made, artificial kind of a thing that's happening right now. It's not like gas is literally going to bubble up from the ground under the gas station magically or anything. But anyways, moving us on out of Krasnodar and also the whole of Crimea. At this very moment, while all that's going on and they're trying to bless the gas down in Krasnodar, we have been able to see that there is an ongoing drone attack against Moscow once more. And several videos did come out right before we went live on air showing drones flying on into Moscow. Here's one of those clips. There it is, an FP1. Quite a lot of them.
I would say most of them making it through.
Not really a lot of air defense I'm seeing right now. It's a little odd. Another one.
Такой же, блядь.
Also, by the way, I got a new video that I just got. Apparently, it's a new one. It does show the Russian air defense shooting down one of the 100 drones that came in. Just one of them, if you want to take a look at that.
Let's take a gander. Let's take a look. Oh! Ёбли! These guys sound good and blasted at 4 in the morning. Very good to know. Like, keeping up with the traditions. We also were able to see another clip of a drone over Moscow in this one. Here it comes. And there it goes.
That sounds like a little janky one. It's got a little like light sounding motor on it.
They ran into budget troubles with that one. We also were able to see that drone getting shot down. We actually had that clip already on the map, but we saw it again already a little early. And we also were able to see that the Russians are putting more pantsiers around the Kapotnia refinery. This one's on a highway bridge near to the area of the refinery.
Вот это увидел я.
There it is.
На мосту стоит ПВО, которое вот на колесах. Там дорогу закрыли на мост, вот здесь садовод охраняет.
Well, man.
В общем, вот сверху.
Whoa, wait a minute. What is that, an American flag burning on that poster back there? What is that?
I don't
Дорогу
know.
закрыли на мост, вот здесь.
It might be, actually.
Yeah, really. It looks like an animation of a fire over an American flag. I'm not sure if I'm seeing things, but it looks like it.
Matthew, Russia loves the United States, according to some people in the government. I mean, why in the world would they ever do that?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of surprising. I'm not sure what that building is in the background back there, but I mean, it appears like it to me. Also, by the way, the Russians put their air defense on top of a bridge. They just made their own civilian bridge a military target by putting it up there.
They sure did.
Садовод охраняет. В общем, вот сверху стоит. Вот этот весь мост закрыли, чтобы он стоял и охранял нас.
Hopefully FSB doesn't find this guy, because he just committed a crime inside of the Russian Federation. But moving us on out of the city of Moscow, which currently is under attack, we did get to hear that there was an explosion inside of Tver in Russia today. Can't you hear it? The air defense fire? And that sound
I hear
of
something squeaking.
That's the motors. They haven't been oiled lately.
Yeah, put some lubricants on them. I know, Daddy.
Man, like those oil fires, man, are actually necessary to keep all the animals of Russia oiled and well lubricated, so they don't go wah, when they're moving around. But we also were able to hear that just south of Russia, well, south of Moscow, and throughout the rest of the Russian Federation in this area, the fuel crisis in Russia and the temporarily occupied territories is growing. When there is still gasoline, its prices have risen sharply. In particular, in Ryazan, the cost of AI-95 has reached 140 rubles. Jeez. In Tuva, Tula, and Samara is 100 rubles per liter. In the Krasnodar territory, the price of 95th octane gasoline rose from 70 to 95 rubles in a day. At some gas stations, people are literally fighting for an extra liter of fuel. In general, the crisis has already reached more than 50 regions of the Russian Federation. And in temporarily occupied Mariupol, local couriers launched a cheerful flash mob. They promised free delivery for a liter of gasoline. And you can see the prices reflected through these oblasts here in these pictures. They are quite high. Moving us on out of all that news inside of Western Russia, the situation isn't really improving for the Russians any to speak of, because there is now another drone attack that is already ongoing against the country, and we expect that the Silver Surfer will be back to make sure that the Compilations refinery gets its fair dues. We've also seen that explosions and attacks were conducted on the city of Bryansk, which we saw in this clip right here.
Опа, ебать, еще.
Oh, блин.
Нихуя себе. Нормально.
Moving on from that, we also got another clip here from Bryansk.
Надо держать телефон, чтобы не
Witness.
пизданулся. Пизда, сейчас туда же.
Блядь.
Oh!
Oh,
Oh!
oh, damn.
And would you look at that? I gotta say,
Something got hit bad in Bryansk, like Bavnovna, as they call it. That thing really got hit.
something just got sat down, like out there in Bryansk. We don't know what, but hopefully we'll find out tomorrow. But that's all of the attacks that we've seen so far inside of Crimea and the Russian Federation's main territories. We're about to be moving on into the rest of our news from the land bridge area and the strikes from there, and also the rest of the news that we have from around the world. But before we get on into all of that news, though, folks, I do hear a lot of people talking about the footage showing some of the Russian escorts getting destroyed in after new Ukrainian strikes. And now that I'm reading that poll, which I thought was on something else, and I hadn't seen it up until right now because it just came out, and I was like, let me make sure to get to that one here really quickly. We're actually going to have to move into the news for that poll and cover it here really quickly to make sure that we can speak a little bit further and a little bit better on the poll, and also give you all the news that y'all will need to be able to answer the poll accurately. Moving us on and into the area of the M14 highway, we have been able to see that the highway is being desolated, and as we were able to see, it appears that the escorts for the Russian supply trucks, those armed convoy escorts, aren't really doing their job all too well. Here's proof of it on the M14 highway. There's the escort, and there's the burned out truck it was escorting right behind it.
Aha. You know, it kind of, if y'all remember our prediction, by the way, it was about 3 or 4 days ago, we saw the Russians introduce these mobile fire groups to their logistics convoys, and the Russians were touting this as the savior of their logistics. And we said, we don't think that's going to work that well, because the Russians can't hit the broadside of a barn to save their life. So how are they supposed to hit a moving drone target in a moving pickup truck with a machine gun bouncing around in a pickup bed? And it turns out we were right. Of course, I think most everybody could have taken that prediction and made that. That was a pretty easy one to make. And here's the failure here today.
It's very sad. It's a tragedy for the Russians. They just don't have the gunnery skills to be able to protect the trucks they're escorting. It turned out poorly for them.
So in honor of this, the Russians will have to commit war crimes by disguising their trucks as civilian vehicles now.
Absolutely! Of course! Like, that's the only conclusion. I'd tell you something, folks. I'd tell you something. Oh, wow, an 18-wheeler just went barreling right through the middle of that. Like,
man, he's not dumb. He's not stopping. He said, I'm not stopping for damn nothing, or I'm going to get hit by a Ukrainian drone.
man, he saw the omens on the road. He said, I am not stopping. He plowed right through everybody that was sitting there on that roadway. But anyways, moving us on out of that strike that we just saw along the highway, and we'll be making sure to cover the others in greater detail here in just a little bit. I do want to make sure that we talk about this poll here really quickly, as a lot of people are talking about these sorts of videos showing that these escorts really aren't providing much of a protection for the trucks that they're trying to escort down the highway. And a lot of people are putting in their thoughts on what's happening with Russian logistics structure at this point, because it isn't looking all too promising. So, Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so what is going to be the fate of the Russian military logistics now that their best effort to save it by sending out Vadim on the machine gun in the pickup truck didn't actually work out that well, to everybody's dismay? So it looks like 67% said Russian logistics are totally doomed. 6-7. 25% said Russians will disguise their trucks as civilian trucks to get the logistics to the military, and 4% said Russian logistics will be saved soon by some stroke of luck, or maybe the water from the brush might do it. So I would say personally, I think the Russian logistics are doomed. The Russians probably knew from the outset that these mobile fire groups were not going to be able to properly defend the trucks, but they needed to do something to appear like they're trying to fix the problem, or otherwise Vladimir Putin's going to be on their ass. So they did it. It failed like we expected, and also probably like they knew it was going to fail. And now they're going to have to start resorting probably to war crimes, which is disguising military logistics as civilian vehicles. We've already seen some preliminary allegations that they've already started doing that, and I would suspect that the Russians, being very deep into war crimes these days in this war, they're probably going to start doing that again in greater quantities. So I'm with the 25%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that I'd generally be with the 67%. I think that Russian logistics are generally doomed, because even if they do try and disguise the vehicles as civilian trucks, which we've already heard that the Ukrainians have alleged that they are and have been attacking some civilian looking vehicles because they claim that they're carrying military cargoes, this generally removes all of the protections provided by the Geneva Convention against civilian vehicles, as the Ukrainians could generally assume that any civilian vehicle is a military vehicle in disguise and hit them with really no discretion. It would be up to the Ukrainians to create their rules of engagement as to how far they would be willing to take that. But generally, the running standard with the Geneva Convention is that once one side breaks the Geneva Convention, generally both sides can break it. To explain this about the best I can, with a World War II example, when the SS gathered up around 100 American prisoners during the Battle of the Bulge and executed them at the Malmedy Massacre, the order was given from the top by Eisenhower, General Eisenhower, who is the Supreme Allied Commander of the Allied Armed Forces in Europe, that if any SS prisoners were taken by Allied forces, they were to be executed on the spot. And generally that's because the SS and that specific portion of the German military had already proven that they were going to execute prisoners. So there would be absolutely no quarter given in turn, as they had already violated the Geneva Convention, and therefore the gloves are off. It's very similar to how the Russian Federation has stricken and hit Ukrainian energy infrastructure for years, and the Ukrainians are now hitting the Russians' energy infrastructure in turn. It generally is considered a war crime to attack enemies' infrastructure, but if the Russians are already attacking yours, then that rule generally goes out of the wayside. You can attack whatever energy infrastructure you would like in the enemy country, and there really is absolutely nothing wrong with it, because that side is already violating that clause in the Geneva Convention. So for that reason, if the Russians try and disguise their vehicles as civilian trucks, that still isn't going to give them any protections. The Ukrainians will just start to target and destroy any and every supply truck or civilian vehicle that they can see that is within reach of their drone forces. So I would say that the supply situation is largely done for in this area, without a doubt, especially in a place like Crimea. One thing that's incredibly important to remember about Crimea is that while it is not a frontline fighting territory, it is an incredibly important support base for the Russian armed forces operations in Kherson and Zaporizhia. If this peninsula does not exist in any operational capacity, there is no indirect fire supports, generally by air or artillery, that can be provided to the Russian frontline forces in Zaporizhia and Kherson. And as a result of that, we could start to see that those frontline positions become a lot more precarious for the Russian armed forces. Additionally, we could see that the lack of coastal defenses and coastal protections around the Crimean Peninsula could create a hotbed for Ukrainian SOF activities, where they're landed on the beaches and are able to generally travel well within the Russian rear line areas without ever being detected, to be able to conduct an endless amount of destruction against Russian forces and to gather a significant amount of reconnaissance against the Russian armed forces as well, which could be used to coordinate and conduct even more effective strikes, which would further degrade their situation more rapidly. Right now, we are looking at a total collapse of Crimea. That has actually happened as of today for the larger part. We are still waiting to see a total collapse of Zaporizhia and Kherson, with Kherson most likely the next to go, considering that it's at the extremity of the supply line's reach, and also we already knew that it was in a very similar situation to Crimea just a couple of days ago. Zaporizhia will probably be in a very bad position, speaking of logistics, but it'll probably never enter in a point that's absolutely critical because they'll still have a direct land connection to the Russian mainland no matter what, and while the supplies could be heavily decreased in tonnage per month, and we could see that most supplies never even make it to the frontline units, they still will have a minimum of supplies to be able to work off of in that area, probably until a Ukrainian counteroffensive begins, and those supplies might be exhausted pretty quickly. So I would say they're generally screwed down here. I don't really think there's any way for them to save themselves.
Also, by the way, let's address the elephant in the room that I keep people seeing bringing up in the live chat. A lot of people keep saying, well, what is the Ukrainians going to do? Because now that Crimea is collapsing with its infrastructure, right now running water is becoming very scarce inside of Crimea. The electricity is not remaining on for most people in Sevastopol and other major cities in Crimea, and now the gasoline is out. So, you know, we're also hearing of early food shortages too. So it's literally across the board a collapse across every major aspect of life in Crimea. So we're looking at a monumental humanitarian issue that's about to crop up here. That's going to be unavoidable at this point. So now that the Russians can't get out, how are we going to mitigate that huge humanitarian disaster that's clearly looming right now? And I'll be honest with you folks, I really don't know that answer. I think that maybe the Russians might start airdropping stuff maybe to the Crimean civilians, or maybe NATO or maybe Ukraine or somebody might drop stuff to these civilians maybe. I'm not sure if that's even going to be enough even at that though. But I mean, that's going to be a problem that's going to get solved. I'm not really sure how they're going to solve it.
I would have to say that I don't really know how they're going to solve it either. I think at this point it might just end up being a humanitarian disaster for the larger part for the Russians, and there's really no way to avoid it. But at the same time, to say that the Ukrainians are doing something in the wrong here would be saying for the larger part that there's no way for them to destroy Russian supply lines logistically, and they just have to keep on trying to grind down Russian infantrymen on the front line for the next 20 years until the Russians run out of living men, and then the war would end at that point, or the Ukrainians would run out of living men, and then the war would end right then and there. So I would have to say it's largely just a difficult situation, but at the end of it all, if the Russians didn't want to be in a situation like this, they could just end the war and walk away, yet they don't choose to, and they choose to continue it, and so the Ukrainians are having to take whatever actions and measures they need to be able to end the war and to succeed and reach victory at some point. So I hope
I think it just popped in my head right now what Ukraine could end up doing with the situation, because Ukraine's not going to let people just die in the masses. Because remember, folks, there's Ukrainians still down there in Crimea. Like, there's a whole bunch of Russians moving in there to go on vacation and also move down there because they like the area on stolen land, of course. But there's still Ukrainians that's been living through this occupation for years inside of Crimea. So I think what the Ukrainians might end up doing is once this situation starts getting more dire and the Russians try to fix it, they could end up coming to some negotiation or deal with Russia to allow some limited logistics to go through the occupied Ukrainian territories to bring food to the civilians, but only food for civilians. So that way nobody starves to death down there or something like that. So they could do that, and then in exchange for that, Russia has to make some concessions on their side, so that way they gain some territory or something like that on the side of the Ukrainians. So it might be an exchange like that. That might be what the Ukrainians are going to try to do with it, because, you know, I'm not sure how many countries are going to stand by and let the people in Crimea starve to death. I'm not sure how many people are going to just sit by and let that happen. I imagine there might be international outcry about that. So, you know, everybody loves to outcry when Ukraine does something, by the way. The Russians, like, harm people all the time. Like, they let people starve. They make people suffer. Nobody says anything about Russia doing that. But when Ukraine does it, I can guarantee you the whole world's going to be in an uproar about that, which, honestly, on one hand, it's understandable. On another hand, it's kind of hypocritical. But I think that's probably what they'll end up doing, probably an exchange.
Maybe they might do an exchange, but at the same time, what the Ukrainians are targeting and hitting inside of Crimea is all considered military targets. So, you know, if the supply lines are getting knocked out, and it's creating a humanitarian situation. Technically, while a humanitarian crisis could be created, the Ukrainians really aren't breaking any clauses of the Geneva Convention with the attacks they're conducting right now. For the larger part, by hitting bridges that are used primarily for military supplies, like the Chandar and Armiance bridges, the Kerch bridge, the railroad and road ferries across the Kerch Strait, the fuel supply depots inside of Crimea. Every single one of those by the Geneva Convention is classified as military targets, depending if they're used primarily by the military. And from what we know, because Russian supply lines intermingle with civilian ones so heavily, and also are primarily using all of those infrastructure items inside of Crimea, each and every one of those is a military target that Ukraine could hit. So as far as Ukraine following the Geneva Convention, well, we can tell largely to the letter, they've done that about as good as they can, but still a humanitarian crisis is going to be created, which I feel is more on the Russians to solve, considering that it's also within their territory, than it is for Ukraine's, because we've never really seen the Russians ever have to give a hoot, and I don't think the Ukrainians ever would give a hoot at this point, about what's going on inside of occupied Russian territory, because the Russians have never done the same inside of Ukrainian territory when they've created humanitarian crises of their own.
Yeah, or another option is this: Ukraine could simply tell the Russians, "Look, we'll go down there and solve your humanitarian issue. Just let a few military vehicles go through your area, your front lines, and let us get down there to Crimea, and we'll just simply take Crimea back, and we'll take care of your civilians under that scenario right there." So, I mean, if Russia just gives Crimea back, that might solve the entire problem.
I mean, it could. I mean, if they just retreat and give up, that solved the problem as well. So, we'll have to see if that ever happens, but it's generally a situation that is going to be a hard one to navigate. I see some people saying it's wrong for people to starve. Well, it's wrong for the Russians to put them in the middle of a war zone where they could starve, the truth be told. I mean, the Russians have been telling people for years that it's safe to go into Crimea. It's totally fine. Everything's great. We're going to crush the Ukrainians. They're less than human. They're basically pigs. And then the Ukrainians start striking back. The Russians completely lie about the situation, and now they got plenty of people in a lurch. And also on top of that, a lot of people are saying, well, they don't have drinking water. Well, they would have drinking water if the Russians didn't blow up the dam, this one right here, that held back all of the water in the reservoir that gave Crimea its drinking water. If the Russians hadn't blown that up, Crimea would still have drinking water right now today, but they blew that up 3 years ago. So as far as the situation that's existing inside of Crimea, if you can point a finger at anybody to really blame, it's more so the Russians to be blamed than really anybody else. The Ukrainians are in the process of fighting a war, and they're trying to destroy military supply lines, so that way Ukrainians don't end up dying every day for the next 20 years on a static front line against the Russian army, because they keep being supplied and they're able to keep fighting. So it's either the Ukrainians let the Russian supply lines remain intact, and they eventually get ground down until they actually lose against the Russian Federation, or they hit the supply lines and the Russian army collapses, and civilians might also be in peril as well. It's a tough call to make, but at the end of the day, a state is always going to survive for its own existence, and the Ukrainians haven't done anything that I've seen so far that's gone out of its way of breaking the Geneva Convention. But we actually have breaking news coming out at this moment right now. So Matthew, what do we got?
Okay, so it looks like we have some breaking news out of Moscow. It looks like another wave of drones has made its way into the capital city of Moscow. We are currently seeing that there are major disruptions. The number one most disrupted airport in the entire country of Russia is the Moscow Vnukovo International Airport right now. That's in the entire world, actually, number one most disrupted. We're also seeing a whole bunch of flights around the entire city of Moscow, and flight patterns and holding patterns, that is, around the major cities. So it is right now, I would assume, that Moscow is under a direct attack. I would assume that's what that means right there. We don't have any more videos to show y'all about that. We will be getting more of that very, very soon, and now that we're seeing the disruption start. So unfortunately, you might want to check Flight Radar 24 live right now and see what you can see on the map. Here it is right here. Yeah, it looks like they're in holding patterns all over the place.
I'm not really seeing any near to the airport. Actually, it looks like 2 flights have taken off in the past several minutes from Vignovo. But we can see one flight out here that's been in a holding pattern for a while. And let's see here. Any others? Well, there was one there and another there. That was one that just took off from Vignovo. And let's see. There was another one that appears to have been in a holding pattern. Another one. But it looks like they're all heading towards the airport at this point. I think whatever it was might be over, that they closed the airport for, because it looks like most aircraft are now heading on their way out of their holding patterns and towards the airport and towards all of the airports in Moscow. So I think whatever this incident was, it was apparently short-lived, at least as far as the air warning went.
I don't know. I think it still might be ongoing as we speak. I'm not sure why a plane would take off in the midst of that, but I'm still seeing on my end, it looks like those airports are reporting disruptions. And also, it looks like the carpet plan might be in effect, according to Russian sources. So I think it might still be ongoing. I'm not sure what's up with that flight still taking off from there, but hey, outside of that, I'm still seeing a whole bunch of holding patterns.
Man, honestly, it's an interesting incident. We'll have to keep an eye on it, and hopefully we'll get some information on what's going on at the moment to be able to figure out why that's happening. But before we move on into the rest of our news for the night, as we still have quite a interesting bit of news to cover and quite a good bit of it left, I do have to say humongous thanks to everybody so much once again who has been watching the show so far. Over the course of the first hour and 8 minutes, we've been able to get 103,000 people here watching the show, and we've had a peak viewership of 21,000 people. I believe about 30 to 40 minutes in. I've got to say that we're entirely honored and greatly appreciative of so many people who have been here tonight watching this channel, and I hope that many of you all have considered this to be your primary source of news, and hopefully a well-sourced and information one as well, to be able to cover what's going on over the course of the day. We are going to be moving on into the rest of the news, but before we do, the fundraiser, which we have been running in the meantime, has reached a whopping $1.2 thousand out of the $2,500 goal that it has. An impressive amount.
Man, it's 54% of the way to the goal right now. The goal tonight, as always, is $2,500 tonight. And the fundraiser, by the way, I don't think we explained at the very beginning. Then we might have forgotten to mention it, by the way. But it's actually for Nova Ukraine, which is one we've run several times. Of course, helping out the Ukrainians yet again. So Nova Ukraine's a really good one. We usually flip-flop between Nova Ukraine and the other one, I believe, is Razom's the other one that we jump between as well. Yeah, between those two right there. So it looks like we're almost 54% to goal. So if you want to donate to help the Ukrainians in this wonderful time of success, I would say the Ukrainians are having, then feel free to give it a little support.
And I gotta say, hopefully we'll see that this fundraiser hits that whopping $2,500 goal. An impressive sort of a goal, and a great thing to see that so many people have already supported the channel's fundraiser. I get so used to talking about super chats. I just said supporting the channel, supporting the fundraiser over the course of the night. Just to make it clear, since I said that and just had to slip up, the fundraiser is run through YouTube Give. 100% of the support that's thrown into the fundraiser goes to the fundraiser in question. YouTube runs the account and manages the money that y'all throw into it from end to end. We don't touch a single cent, and therefore it goes directly to the fundraiser and the nonprofit in question. So, with that in mind, it is time for us to get on into those top donors to this fundraiser that we've seen so far tonight. And Matthew, what do we got?
And so far, we've had a 150 from Charles Z07. A huge shout to Charles. Also a 103 from Fake and Flamboyant. And thank you, Fake and Flamboyant, for that 103 right there for the fundraiser. Also a big shout out to Hal Rose for a 100, along with Activista LSA, who put in a 100 as well. And Mike, who put in a 50, along with John Person, who put in a 50 as well. And Coyote Maine, who just put in a 50 also. We are just shy of $1,300 raised right now. So if you'd like to put in even a $5, a $10 donation to fundraiser, all those smaller donations, by the way, which unfortunately we'd love to call them all off, but we would be here literally all night long and not be able to cover the news if we did that. But a huge shout out to everybody who's donating, because all those are adding up, and we do appreciate it. I know Ukraine appreciates it. But Enforcer, what say you?
And Ukraine certainly does appreciate it. The Ukrainian people are extremely grateful and appreciative for the support that they've been getting from around the world for years now. And I have to say that it's a wonderful and amazing thing to know that so many people continue to support these fundraisers and continue to see that while this channel is covering news from around the world, the Elise Spring Army itself is actually helping out people in the very parts of the world that we cover the news on each and every single day. And I've got to say that we're massively appreciative to all of the amazing folks who supported the fundraiser tonight, both big donations and small, because every single one of them comes together in the thousands to create the fundraiser totals that we see every single weekend. I've got to say a humongous thanks to y'all once again. Y'all have hearts of gold and are incredibly kind and generous to be able to support these fundraisers this many years in. As a matter of fact, it's 1,579 days into the war, and we're still seeing that at this point people are still supporting the fundraisers that are being run to try and help out the folks in Ukraine and elsewhere around the world on those fundraisers that we've run in, say, the Middle East for U.S. forces, in LA for the LA Fire Department, and every other fundraiser that we've run in the channel's history. And so massive thanks to y'all. And with that, it is time for us to move on into 3 questions here before we get on into the rest of the news for the night. So Matthew, what do we got?
And also, by the way, we have raised over $1.8 million here on the channel in total between all the different charities. We can't say it's for a single charity because we've run like a plethora of charities over the years since the channel's been running, but it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.8 million plus dollars raised on the channel as a whole for charity, which is insane, by the way. And that's over the course of several years. But a huge shout out to everybody once again for helping us to hit such a number like that. But anyways, though, jumping into our first question here, this one is going to go to none other than Marie Jacobs, who said, do you expect Ukraine to send military troops into Crimea anytime soon, or just stuck with drones for now and LLT, LSA?
I think we're generally going to be stuck with drones for now. I don't think there's going to be sort of an atmosphere that'll exist over the year to see Ukrainian armed forces physically retaking Crimea on the ground over the course of this year at all. I feel like if anything that might happen next year, but we'll definitely see Ukrainian special forces raids probably increasing in tempo and fervor in this area over the next several months, now considering that the Russian military is operating at a much reduced sort of a rate and an ability within the peninsula due to the lack of fuel. And also we know that most other supply lines and resources inside of Crimea are also dwindling into non-existence as well. So I hope that does address that the best I possibly can, Marie Jacobs. A great question. And long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never truly die. And with that, we're on to the second question of this segment.
And this one is going to go to none other than One Visual, who said, what do you think Ukraine will do at the end of the war to clean up all the fiber optic cables from the drones?
I don't really know, actually. I'd say that they probably are going to go through and just have people hand pick the fiber optic cables up and just kind of like try and ball them together. I don't really know how fragile they are. I'd assume they're not extremely fragile, or where you probably could just grab them and try and just spool them up. But I guess that's the way they're going to have to do it, is just by hand over a long period of time. And most of the time, stuff like that is never fully recovered or completely removed from the environment. Many people might not know this, but there are still major minefields that exist in the Falkland Islands from the Falklands War in 1982 that the British had just never cleared out. And in some areas inside the Falklands, they have signs up on the roadways saying that you're entering a minefield, don't drive off the road because you might end up driving over a landmine. And also another thing that a lot of people don't know, like to show how long of a lasting sort of a trend this is that in France, they have these things called the Zone Rouge. And to show you all these here really quickly, the Zone Rouge is actually the front lines of no man's land in the First World War. And most of these areas are impossible to demine. So for this reason, all of these areas in red are called red zones in French. And for that reason, people can't enter them. It's just too dangerous. There's so much unexploded ordnance and a whole bunch of other stuff, like, for example, the toxicity left by some forms of chemical warfare, that it's just impossible to rehabilitate it. You can actually still see, generally, that area here on the map. And let me see if I can show you all some of it here near Cambrai. So let me go up here to Cambrai. I need to find that here. Where the hell is it? I'll have to type it in. So if I go up here to Cambrai, you can actually see some of this area of the Zone Rouge out here south of Cambrai, where there are settlements, but it's generally considered still somewhat unsafe, and you have to move with an extreme amount of caution. So I'd have to say that generally, I think we'll probably see something like that in the future. Although fiber optic cables aren't extremely dangerous, we'll probably see that there's a decent amount of them that'll just be hanging out in the Ukrainian countryside for decades to come.
Oh, yeah. You know the bad part about it is there's really no incentive for like private companies to go clean it up, because when you have valuable materials like copper and stuff like that, if you have like old wiring or something, private companies have somewhat of an incentive to go get it and clean it up because they can sell it for scrap value. But with fiber optics, though, it's basically worthless. There's really no scrap value to fiber optic cable, and also even if you want to have like a recycling company come in and get it, it's very hard and expensive to recycle the fiber optic cable because the components that make it up, they're really just not valuable, really, for the most part, and also it's hard to recycle. So it's just a mess, really. It's just there. Also, by the way, it litters the whole landscape. Like, it's hard to even like pick it up when you want to pick it up. So it works great for getting around signal jammers, but it's just absolutely ruining the environment.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. If anything, the people who would probably pay for it would be, say, like forestry services in Ukraine, if they have something similar to what we have in the United States, or farmers individually paying or working by hand to try and clear out the fiber optic lines from their fields once they get back to them. Because there really isn't a monetary incentive for a company to come through and clear it. So either the Ukrainian government would have to clear it, a government agency would have to clear it, or the individuals that own the land itself would have to go through and clear it out by hand, little by little over the years, or never clear it at all. So I hope that does address the question the best we can. A really good question, by the way, One Visual. That's one that I don't think anyone's ever asked before. So I'd say that's quite a unique and very interesting question right there. And with that, it's time for us to get on into the last question of the segment, and then we're going to be getting on into the rest of the news from around the world.
All right, and our last question of this segment is going to go to the White Pony, who puts in a $20 super chat. And thank you, good sir, as well for that support. He said, now that Ukraine has sent Russia back to the horse and buggy days, what do you think Russia will do to retaliate? And the Russian military is so punch drunk now. Do you think that Putin will resort to tactical nukes, perhaps?
I still think tactical nukes are largely off the table. I don't really think there would be a way for Russia to be able to justify that well enough, and also the implications of what that would create in the world would just be too much to bear for the Russians and everyone else, so they probably won't conduct a tactical nuclear action at any point against the Ukrainians. On the other hand, however, I would say that since the Russians have gotten to the horse and buggy era, they're probably going to be in a pretty dangerous position supply-wise, to the point that they're probably going to go entirely on the defensive and start fighting the war like they're trying to defend the land that they have and stop the Ukrainians from retaking it. So I have a feeling that the momentum is about to be shifting back into Ukraine's hand, to where they're entirely the ones poised to be on the offensive, and the Russians are the ones that are having to fight in endless defensive to try and stop the Ukrainians from reclaiming the territory that they originally had from their 1991 borders. So I think that's generally how it's going to be looking here in the near future of how the war is going to be unfolding. But I would still say that I do not believe that a tactical nuclear weapon is ever going to be used by the Russian Federation. Well, I would say not ever. Like, I would not say that it's never going to be used. I'd say that's a highly unlikely chance. But never say never, as they always say. There is always a chance that they could. I just think it's very low. But with that, I hope that has addressed that incredibly well, the White Pony. And a huge thanks to you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, folks, it's time for us to move on and into the rest of the news that we have for the night. We actually wanted to bring y'all a little bit of news with a local touch to it tonight. A local touch. I have to get through the American news here really quickly. It's kind of like an interim to what happened in Iran for just a brief moment. So we're actually going to bring y'all over here to the United States, because we have seen a very interesting development here in Salt Lake City recently. And many of y'all might know that the Enforcer HQ has gone through a great deal of upgrades over the past several years. We first started in Birmingham, Alabama for Enforcer HQ 1.0 and 2.0, and Enforcer HQ 3.0 took the 2,000-mile long journey through the United States to make it to Salt Lake City, where the headquarters is at right now. Currently, just to the south, near to Provo, there is the large iron fire, which is still burning, and right now I've heard that no settlements and structures have been burnt down in the town of Eureka, but it's gotten incredibly close to doing that. We've also been able to hear that there is another fire that's actually a lot closer to us that is currently happening right now near to the area of the lime kiln and also the University of Utah, which is currently eating up this mountain right here. Now, we were able to get one of our finest reporters, Enforcer Matt, down there on the ground today to be able to try and film the ongoing situation within this area and to give you all a little bit of an idea of what we're seeing right now in the Salt Lake City area. So let me show you all here really quickly what our reporter was able to get on the ground, I believe from the parking lot near to the area of the Red Butte Garden Amphitheater, of the fire and the firefighting efforts that have been conducted around our city of Salt Lake. So here's the clip. Matthew, can you explain to us what's going on here?
So what you're seeing here is the Salt Lake Fire Department and also the wildfire management out here trying to put it out with the helicopter. They were running around with the helicopter. I believe they were doing like water pickups from a nearby reservoir, I believe. And they also brought in a charter flight on a private jet that was dropping down fire retardant on the fire as well. That one came in right as I was leaving. I didn't get a video of that, unfortunately. But as you can see, though, the entire side of the mountain here has been burnt to a crisp, and it didn't seem like it was really under control, really, for the most part. It seemed like it was still burning quite badly on the backside of this mountain right here.
luckily is largely a grass and shrub fire, so it's not burning extremely heavy in the larger sense. It is largely still, from what we can tell, not really heavily contained, but luckily it's not, say like a California wildfire where it has a forest to feed off of to give it a great deal of fuel to be able to fuel the fire's growing veracity. We also were able to see a picture here that was taken from Interstate 15, near to the area of the Salt Lake City Metropolitan Center, and also looking over at the mountain, which is currently being burned in the blaze. I actually know this mountain quite well, folks. It's a very distinct one within the area. It's this one right here, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Maddie. I don't know the name of it. Apparently it's Alma Peak, but I believe that's Alma Peak right there, isn't it?
I think so. I think the mountain's on fire. It's called Red Butte. I think it's called like Butte. I think because all the trails around there had Red Butte in front of it.
Man, his name Butt. Luckily, nobody's been injured or killed by this fire. Luckily, no one's been killed by the iron fire down south either, near to Eureka. But quite an interesting little situation that we have right now in the Salt Lake City area. There's also another fire that's broken out, I believe, over to the west, somewhere around Tooele, if I'm not mistaken. Which is also quite. Let me show you the whole map of all the wildfires. Here's this wildfire. This is the Bonneville fire, which is only 5% contained. Man, this is reminding me, man, of the Palisades fire just for Salt Lake at this point. We also have a fire that's out here. This is the Hastings fire, which is burning in quite literally the middle of nowhere. And then there's the Middle Fork fire up here kind of near to Ogden. So quite an interesting little situation that we're seeing right here around Salt Lake City, and we'll be trying to keep you all updated on the situation as it continues to unfold. Moving us on out of Utah, however, we have been able to get an update, folks, on the Greenland situation. Many people have always been wondering, why in the world are we trying to take Greenland? Well, according to one U.S. official, it is because the reason for acquiring Greenland is to secure access to seafood so that Red Lobster could potentially bring back unlimited shrimp.
Oh,
we're not even kidding. We're not even kidding. That's literally one of the reasons.
I've heard a lot of reasons for invading countries. Back in the day, it was weapons of mass destructions, yellow cake. Well, we've invaded. That wasn't food, by the way. Yellow cake was definitely not food. But apparently, for the unlimited shrimp, we will have to invade Greenland for that right there. Also, I would love to know what U.S. official even said that. They're saying a U.S. official allegedly spoke to a magazine or something. So I don't know who the hell would even said that. It's almost unbelievable, really. I'm not even sure if I believe it.
It's allegedly Tom Dans, this guy right here, because this is actually the excerpt from the New Yorker with the direct statement and the quote. So I'll read this to y'all to make sure that we don't get it out of context. According to the author of this New Yorker post, when I met him for lunch in Washington earlier this year, he declined to speak further on the record, except to articulate a narrow symbiotic vision for the future. My view, according to the quote that was put out in the New Yorker, allegedly by Tom Dans, my view is that the United States could take all the seafood Greenland could produce and cut out the middleman and keep it from China, and you could bring back all you can eat shrimp at Red Lobster.
Man, I'm going. I don't even know if that dude really said that. I'll be honest. Take this one with a big grain of salt, like a big allegedly with this one right here, because I find that hard to believe. Now, if he comes out and says it directly, where we can see him say it, now obviously we can't deny it then. But I have a hard time believing that anybody even would say something like that right there. So I got to see the guy say it to believe it.
Back in the day, folks, there used to be these things called banana republics in Central America because the fruit companies like United Fruit would basically try and get the U.S. military to go down there and overthrow the governments that were trying to pay the workers on the banana plantations fairly and whatnot to keep the banana companies' profits really high. Apparently, these days, we're now going to have what's called the Shrimp Republic for Red Lobster. You can't make this stuff up these days. I can't believe that that's an actual article, but I'm not gonna lie, folks, I generally find it hard to believe as well if that was ever seriously said. I would be blown away. But moving us on out of all that, it's now time for us to get on into the middle of the East. And as all of y'all know, the middle of the East is actually bringing us to Switzerland today because that's where the talks are being held between the United States and the Islamic Republic of Iran. Apparently, very early on today, the president threatened the Iranian delegation. According to Fox News, they said that the direct quote from the president was, "You close it, as in the Strait of Hormuz, and you won't have a country. You won't even make it back to your effing country." Afterwards, the Iranians decided that they had gotten done talking, and they said that they left because of the president's threats to the Iranian delegation. We also were able to see the clip right here, which we won't be able to show because it no longer exists, of them literally getting up and walking out of the meeting, leaving the vice president, Kushner, and also Witkoff literally just standing in the corner and figuring out what the hell just happened as they got up and walked away. It already didn't start off well at the beginning of the morning before they even got threatened, as they walked into the building and completely refused to shake hands with the U.S. delegation for a photo op, instead preferring to go directly into the talks. We can't show the clip.
Yeah, I can't show the clip. Just want to make sure you weren't going to show that.
Yeah, we can't show the clip, but here's a still right here of the foreign minister Abbas Araghchi and the rest of the Iranian delegation walking into the building for the beginning of the talks. We've also been able to hear that a little bit later on, the U.S. delegation did have a picture put out. That's Witkoff and Kushner right there. They look quite impressive. And we also were able to see, additionally, that the Iranians did get up and they did leave. That was confirmed by multiple sources, and that was also on film. It's just that, sadly, we can't show that footage because it's copyrighted by other groups. Still, we have been able to hear that as of right now, the talks appear to be beginning again in some modest form between the two sides, after the Iranians almost got up and went back to Iran, and we're not really sure where it's going, at least for now. We did get to hear that Qatar did announce that they basically agreed that the memorandum of understanding is in fact the memorandum of understanding, so we do know that significant strides in diplomacy have been made, but so far we haven't seen anything legitimate outside of my sarcasm that's come out of these talks so far. They have just begun, and they did give both sides 60 days to be able to try and come up with some sort of a peace deal that they could actually sign and ratify between the two sides, so we're probably not going to be expecting anything coming out of this for maybe the next couple of weeks. But at the same time, though, it doesn't really appear that it's starting off all too well. The Iranians are already bitching out the U.S. delegation, and just put it in plain language, and we're already seeing that the United States, thanks to the amazing abilities of the president, are going to be screwing over the peace talks basically from the outset. So the Iranians really don't want to talk. The U.S. is threatening them, which is going to stop them from talking, which they didn't want to anyways, and so it appears that the peace talk situation is going to be largely very unstable or possibly collapsing here within the very near future. In the meantime, the UK MTO did report an incident off the coast of Yemen today, as a incident 50 nautical miles southeast of Al-Shahir, Yemen. The master of a product tanker reported being approached by a skiff carrying 5 armed persons who appear to be attempting to board the vessel. In response, the vessel conducted evasive maneuvers and altered course away from the skiff. The vessel is now proceeding to its next port of call, and the crew were reported safe. We're not entirely sure if that was the Houthis or the Somali pirates, but it's a very dangerous area of the world's waters right now. We've also been able to hear, additionally, that the Iranians did put out a statement today, according to MB Ghalibaf, who's the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, that do they not realize, this was a statement directed to the President of the United States, do they not realize that if their threats had been effective, they would not have reached today's state of desperation? We do not take the Americans' threats seriously. They would do better to be careful about their statements. Our armed forces are prepared to respond in a different manner. The more they talk, the more it is we who act. So the Iranians are still making it clear that they believe that they're in the wheelhouse and generally running the show. At the same time, we also were able to hear that the president did put out a statement today saying that Iran's proxies, Iran must immediately stop their highly paid proxies in Lebanon from causing trouble. If they don't, we'll hit Iran very hard again, just like we did last week, only harder. And that was the statement from the President of the United States. So we can see that the threats are still being thrown around quite liberally by both sides. Additionally, we also were able to hear that Hezbollah put out a statement of their own today by their leader, Naim Qassem, who vowed that the group will resist any Israeli presence in Lebanon, declaring that the project to eliminate Hezbollah has failed and the group will respond to any ceasefire violations, making it clear that Hezbollah is going to continue to fight the IDF until their dying breath inside of Lebanon, because that's what they do, because they're a radicalized ideological group of terrorists. We've also been able to see additionally, as some side news, that there was a major explosion today at some sort of an industrial complex inside of Qatar, and we were able to get further information that apparently, according to the Qataris, Qatar Energy stated, according to the Qatari Interior Ministry, that an explosion occurred at a factory in the Ras Al Khaimah industrial area, and civil defense teams responded to the incident, and no injuries or leaks were recorded, although the major fire and explosion, to me, seems to be a leak. We also were able to see a video here showing the explosion right here. From what we've been told, Iran has not been involved in this.
That's
But
quite
that,
serious right there for it to be just a explosion from starting up their facilities again for the first time. It's like the thing just blew up just out of the blue from starting the facility. That's a little bit of a hard thing to believe. Also, the shaking from this was being reported in the nearby Gulf states as well. Apparently, they felt it in nearby Gulf states. So everybody thought it was an attack by Iran. I thought it was earlier too. I was like, damn, Iran's going to attack Qatar in the midst of the peace talks inside of Switzerland. That's a whole new level of offensiveness right there. But apparently it was just an accident, if you believe the report.
yeah, apparently, according to the Qataris, it was just a pure accident. Nothing too serious to look into. Don't need any investigations further. But a lot of people are talking about the situation outside of that weird Qatar incident that happened today with the negotiations that are going on in Switzerland right now. And as we are seeing, there is quite a lot of crazy stuff going on with it. Threats thrown by the United States, the Iranians treating us like dogs. Basically, everybody's not really wanting to be at these talks, yet they are. And Matthew, what are people thinking about this right now? And what are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so the talks in Switzerland have clearly been an opportunity for Iran to make the U.S. look like a whole bunch of punks. And Iran's been taking that opportunity all day long today to do everything they possibly can to punk out the United States. They've been ignoring them at the handshake little celebration thing where they're supposed to take photos with the press. They just walked past the U.S. officials and acting like they weren't there. Then at one point, they walked out of the talks and said they were done and simply left the U.S. standing there. And also, there's been hardly any direct communication between the U.S. officials and the Iranian officials. So Iran is playing games. We said they were going to do that, by the way, and everybody on the channel, for the most part, agreed with that. And it turns out that was a very correct assumption. And Iran is still making stupid demands today. They're now demanding that they be allowed to keep enriching uranium, which is the whole reason we went to war with them, was over their nuclear program. They're now saying they'll never give that up. They're also demanding money, all kinds of monies from the United States, because, of course, they want that so that way they can probably expand their nuclear program and also their ballistic missile program, too. So, do you think between all this crazy stuff happening today, and not to mention, by the way, the threats lobbed at Iran by the U.S. president, and then Iran lobbing their own threats back at the U.S. forces in the region, are the talks over, or what the hell is going on? 35% said yes, and war is now back on the menu. Excuse me. And 38% said no, talks will continue soon, and 19% said yes, the talks are over for good. And I would say I'm with the 37%. The talks are not over yet. They should be over. If we had any sense left in our heads at this point in the U.S. leadership, they would end the talks now and tell Iran, if you want to be disrespectful and try to treat us like punks, we'll put the most powerful military to work on you again. But we're not doing that for some reason. So we're letting Iran punk us. We're still talking to them. The last report that came out was a joint statement from Qatar and Pakistan saying that there's apparently a new agreement that the U.S. and Iranian officials will talk for 60 days, which I thought was already agreed to. I thought that was in the MOU, but they're acting like this is a brand new thing that they just agreed to. They're trying to pretend like they're making progress, which is insane. So the talks are technically still going, but it's like hanging on by a thread. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd say that the talks are probably going to continue. I'll be with the 37%. But they shouldn't. It's absolutely stupid to talk to the Iranians. They've made it incredibly clear that there is absolutely no reason to talk to them. They're not taking the talks seriously. They're treating us like punks, and they're still demanding even more from us. So it's absolutely stupid to even try and talk to them. I'd also say it's absolutely stupid to even try and talk to them, considering that the president went and threatened to basically, according to the quote from Fox, kill them before they could even make it back to Iran. Because if that's the kind of mindset and mentality that the U.S. government is in right now, what the hell is the point of even talking to them when we're in a position of threatening to wipe them out before they can even make it back to Iran for the war to restart? What would even be the point of talks in that kind of an atmosphere? And there is absolutely no reason. The reason why, from what we know right now, is that the Islamic Republic of Iran has blockaded the Hormuz. The U.S. has absolutely no will or follow-through or competency, at least within the White House right now, to see that there is no way forward but to continue the conflict and to forcibly reopen the Hormuz. And because of that, we're in this whole rigmarole of trying to conduct talks that are going to endlessly go nowhere, and we're going to keep staying in this limbo land indefinitely. That is an absolutely stupid kind of a reality to live in, but they're still going to try and push it forward. If you ever expect, folks, the current administration to do the right thing in foreign policy, then you ought to automatically assume that they're going to do the complete opposite of what you would expect them to do. What we would expect them to do right now is in the talks, considering that they've already started off horrifically, and the Iranians have put great shame on our nation and our diplomatic delegation with their actions so far, and to restart the war. That's what you would think would happen. But every single time that we've seen the U.S. needs to take a clear and obvious action by the current administration, they always take the complete opposite one that's needed. So I would say, without a doubt, we're going to watch the talks go on probably for weeks at this point before they actually end. And they'll probably end with absolutely nothing being achieved, or we'll sign away quite literally everything that we can to the Iranians. It'll happen in one form or another, but this whole talks period will be completely pointless, and it will go on with really no reason for the next several weeks as they try to make it work. But moving us on.
Also, why are they doing, like, this isn't meant to be political, by the way, but why are they doing the vice president so dirty? They have the vice president over there right now being punked out, and everybody knew the Iranians were going to try to punk the U.S. officials. That was obvious. They were going to try to do that. So now everybody's dogpiling on the vice president about being punked out. It's like, well, it's like he's not there necessarily by his own volition. He's been told to go there by the president. That's why he's there. So the vice president's running around, honestly, looking kind of stupid at this event inside of Switzerland with the Iranians acting like idiots. And he's just like wandering around. He's being mocked all day long. There's like photos of him looking shocked and confused and dazed. It's like, well, I'm like, what else is he supposed to do? He's been told to go there. He's stuck there. He's trying to deal with a situation that's impossible. I'll be honest, I don't really care for the vice president that much, but that's beside the point. It's just really about putting him in an impossible scenario. It's really kind of silly.
Well, you'll notice that they only bring him out when they're trying to, basically line up a fool. Have you noticed that lately? Like, he's not in any photo ops by the White House or anything like that until they need some clown, and then they whip him out. Like, if anything, I see Marco Rubio around more in most White House photo ops than the vice president at this point.
Yeah, I think they're trying to use him as a scapegoat. It seems to me like they're trying to set him up so that way he publicly looks like an idiot, which, the Iranians are doing a swell job making the U.S. officials look like idiots, which we shouldn't allow, by the way. But the U.S. is allowing that to happen. That's the stupid part. So we're looking like fools right now, and that's working against the vice president now, because now everybody's going to look at him like a real fool now. And, they're going to try to set him up with the whole narrative that, oh, it's his fault that it went wrong. It's like, that kind of junk's really dirty right there.
Yeah, it's not a good look, and also I have a feeling that's a bit of a power play thing, because if you remember, the last vice president was done like that as well, because they're looked at to kind of be the next in line. The VP usually tries to run for president, and no one can outshine the sun right now, so they got to make sure to put him down a couple of notches, so that way he's in there with the rest of them, basically the rest of the cabinet members. That might also be the reason as well that they're doing that, but it's quite bizarre. And honestly, if they had any respect for the vice president or the U.S.'s position as a nation, they would pack up and leave right now. They wouldn't even start talks with the Iranians again. They've made us look like fools. They've tried to embarrass us and put great shame on us, and we'll put great shame on them on the battlefield. That ought to be what we're working off of as our answer and our objective, but oddly enough, we're not. So we'll just have to see how it goes. The U.S. is going to be dragged, unfortunately, our reputation back through the dirt again, as the Iranians will probably make us look like clowns for the next couple of weeks for no reason. We don't even have to do it. We don't even have to talk to them. We don't have to look like clowns, but they're probably going to try to make that happen, and we'll probably just let them do that for the next couple of weeks until we give up. So I hope that we don't. But that's what's going to happen. So moving us on out of that bit of news inside of Switzerland and the Middle East at large, we've also been able to hear of some more news inside of Ukraine. We were able to hear today within Kyiv that apparently, according to Zelensky, he stated that the U.S. president planned to ask U.S. defense companies to establish licensed production of air defense missiles in Europe and Ukraine. So it appears that licensed production is going to be happening under U.S. companies and U.S. firms operating inside of European and European countries and the state of Ukraine. So a little bit of an interesting one with that, and that isn't actually licensed production. Licensed production is giving another company the license to produce the weapons, and then the original company gets some royalties for the production of that weapon. Licensed production isn't taking, say, like Raytheon and then building Tomahawks in Ukraine in a Raytheon factory. That's not how that works. But anyways, moving on from that, we've also been able to hear in the location unknowns today that a picture of an M1A1 AIM came out. The M1A1 AIMs were actually provided by Australia to the state of Ukraine. M1A1 AIMs are specifically the Australian export variant of the Abrams. And we can actually see some of them here in the Ukrainian armed forces on the training fields, getting ready for further deployments to the front lines. The Ukrainians have actually stated that the M1 Abrams variant, a main battle tank, actually is not their favorite because it is proven to have some difficulties with not really crew survivability, but durability for the larger part, especially due to its jet turbine engine, which requires requires a significant amount of maintenance, even inside of more humid and wet environments like Ukraine. And that actually was a huge problem of operating the Abrams inside the Middle East during the invasion of Iraq in 2003 and the Gulf War of 91, is that a lot of the Abrams jet turbines suck in a significant amount of sand and really any sort of particulates or dust in the air, and it requires the filters to get cleaned out fairly regularly, meaning that Abrams can actually be maintenance intensive because of their jet turbine engines or power plants for the tanks. So the Ukrainians have said that this isn't really their favorite tank, and we've started to hear that a lot over the years. They actually prefer the much more robust engines and power plants in the Leopard 2 series main battle tanks that have been provided to them, and we have generally seen that they don't really like the Challenger main battle tanks that have been provided by the British either, and have generally put them almost in the same category as the Abrams, although the Challenger doesn't have a jet turbine, it actually has a normal internal combustion engine, a diesel. But moving us on out of that side, now we've also been able to see the Russian casualty report over the past 24 hours, and holy moly!
Whoa. Also, by the way, is this the most
Wait a minute.
recent one right here? I was told that this might be not the most recent one.
Wait a minute. Hold up. I need to take a look. Yeah, that's the most recent one on here. Hold up. Let me go check some.
Let's do a quick scan real quick. Let's see if this is if it's the most up to date. I think those numbers look familiar.
And here we have the casualty. Oh my god! Hey!
Shout out to Miss Visa.
I'm so sorry to Miss Nisa, by the way. I just saw that you sent the message, and for earlier in the day, like at 8 in the morning, and for some reason it just didn't come through as a notification for me, because I don't ever remember clicking on your DM over the day, but it is there, and so I'm very sorry about that. But Miss Nisa, keeper of the records, has been able to report that 2 Bobcat skid steers have been lost today. Hey! Nice. Very nice to see.
Very nice.
Very nice. Man, the response, I was like, damn, man, it's taking a minute. But Miss Nisa,
I couldn't hear anything. You just went totally blank on my end. You got so loud it just cut out.
Oh, dang, man. I'd be hitting that bass, that loud drumming bass. But according to Ms. DC, keeper of the records, Russian losses the June 21st to 2026 day 1,579, 93 artillery pieces is the 9th highest daily loss. 475 auto and fuel tanks is the 5th highest. 2,346 drones ranks as the 8th highest. And 8 ground robotic complexes is tied for 8th. Over the past 24 hours, we have been able to report that 1,290 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 8 main battle tanks, 10 APCs, 93 artillery pieces, 2 MLRSs, 2 air defense systems, 2,346 drones, 8 ground robotic complexes, 475 supply and fuel trucks, and the 2 Bobcat skid steers. All in all, an incredibly good day, and we always love to see a good day in Ukraine. Moving us on out of that, we've also been able to see that within the Luhansk area, Ural 4320s are continuing to be obliterated near to the frontline areas. From what we know, the driver of the supply truck was killed in the strike, and does show that Russian supply trucks, wherever they may be in occupied territories, are still continuing to be hammered and destroyed by the armed forces of Ukraine and their drone attack forces. We also were able to see Russian logistics in the Pokrovsk front from today, actually, showing us a little glimpse into the life of a Russian supply runner.
What is he driving? A golf cart?
I guess. And he's also driving by the destroyed ruins of his brethren.
That's never a good sign when you drive in to drop stuff off and you see, nonstop destruction on the way there. That might be an omen.
A bad omen.
A bad omen.
Man, oh man. Ah, man, man, these supply trucks, though, they are cooking all over it.
It really is wild, though. We watched these videos for the past couple of weeks now, but, it's wild to see an entire highway with just, littered, burning trucks throughout the whole thing. It's the amount of, drone logistics that go into this, keeping these nonstop attacks up like this, creating a highway of death by the Ukrainians on the Russian, back highways. It's that takes a hell of a lot of coordination 24/7 to keep that up like that.
It really does, honestly. It's a very impressive thing when you think about the machine side of things, of having to keep this whole war machine running for the Ukrainians. It's pretty impressive. Here's another clip of them keeping it going here. Striking more Russian supplies, including the special equipment. Would you look at that? It's really what the Bobcat skid steers are in the loss report.
Then you have this junk mobile with junk all up in the trunk.
Man, that was a good one. Hey, yo.
See, not even the Buhanka could outrun the drone. It just had to give in to the drone.
Man, it couldn't fight back anymore. It just couldn't. But do y'all want to see how many vehicles have been destroyed over the past 48 days down here? Here it is in 48 seconds. This is 500 supply trucks in 48 days.
Oh, oh, it's too much. It's too much. I'm being overstimmied.
Man, you're about to turn into that guy in Moscow running from the one explosion and going, man, but it's kind of crazy to watch
Jeez.
this, you know?
I feel like this is like, you know how they put you like the Manchurian candidate, they strap you to the chair and they like flash images in front of your face, like brainwash you or something. I feel like this is that. They like put them on the chair and they're like, watch this, Russian. They're like, no, no, no. They're like looking at all the instructions.
Man, honestly, man, it's kind of wild, though, when you think about it. This is 500 vehicles in 48 seconds that have been destroyed by the armed forces of Ukraine in 48 days. That's just from this one unit. We don't even know how many it is over the whole of the front. Well, it's actually thousands of vehicles a day, because we already have that in the loss report. So not really good for them. I mean, it's pretty bad. Meanwhile, down at Bryansk, we also were able to see that there was an explosion in the city as Ukrainian drones were able to hit their mark.
Надо держать телефон, чтобы не пизданулся.
This guy sounds nervous.
Да,
Don't
сейчас
be
туда
nervous.
же.
Блядь.
Blah. Oh!
Oh,
That's that strike in Bryansk, and it hit the railway station in Bryansk. That's specifically a rail yard. Let me show y'all. Right here. Matthew thought he could escape the train segment, but the train segment will always follow us forever and ever and ever. Because it never escapes. It never does. It never truly escapes us, you see. Let me show y'all here. There is the rail yard. This is the one that they blew up. There is the shitty train that the Russians run from here back into Russia. So, you know, a little interesting with that. But that is the rail yard that they hit right here at this railway station. I always found it kind of ghetto, to be completely frank with you all. The Russians always built, like, the rail yards right next to the railway stations. Kind of seems a little odd to me, because in America, that's never how they do it. Like, the rail yards are very far away, usually from the actual passenger stations, or they're off to the side a little bit, because it's kind of, you know, a little jank to have all the cargo operations happening literally right at the passenger platforms, basically. That's pretty stupid, but they did hit it, and it was quite nice to see. And so with that, folks, it is time for us to move on out of that news from the land bridge in Ukraine. And it's time for us to actually move on into the second segment of this stream, where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. Hey! Because we have no more news to cover. That was all the news for today. It's unbelievable. In 1 hour and 52 minutes, we covered all the news. So every single bit of it. For 136,000 people who have been watching the stream so far in the 1 hour and 50 minutes that we've been covering it. And I gotta say a humongous thanks to every single one of y'all so much once again for being here with us tonight and enjoying this stream. And also, I gotta say a humongous thanks to everybody who has been supporting this incredible fundraiser. It's gotten up to a whopping $1,756.
whoa. That's about $600 to the goal right there. You know what? That's about
744.
600. That's about 600 something away from the goal right there. I am correct. It is 600 something away. I said or something. But that's very close to the goal right there. I must say right there, 600 smackaroos, and we'll be hitting that goal line.
And I gotta say, folks, hopefully we'll be able to hit that fundraiser goal tonight. It's a little bit short right now, just a little bit short, but with a little bit of elbow grease and a little bit of effort, we can make it to that fundraiser goal, and we can hit it nice and easy. Nice and easy. Easy peasy, as they call it. And hopefully we'll be able to see that fundraiser goal is hit here incredibly soon. But before we get on into that, Matthew, do we have any other top donors to shout out in the meantime?
So in the meantime, a big shout out to Big Berg, who put in a $50 donation to the fundraiser. Also a big shout out to Unreliable Narrator Cat, who put in a $50. And also Chef Danny B, who put in a $40, by the way. And a huge shout out to all three of y'all for also being top donors to the fundraiser. And a huge shout out to everybody that's throwing in support to that fundraiser, because we are just about $600 shy of hitting that goal right there. So if you'd like to donate to it, help us reach that goal, feel free to throw in a little support to it. Of course, the Ukrainians would appreciate that, of course.
And of course, they would greatly appreciate it, as the fundraiser is now sitting at $1,801 raised. So now it is $699 away from the fundraiser goal. Oh, Activista just throwing a 50. Hey,
Oh,
look at that.
nice.
Look at that. Did it here. Holy moly. Espen
Whoa.
Turgenhauser just put in 2,000 Norwegian krona. That just got it to
Dang.
$2,057.
I think that's roughly a $200 donation right there with the 2,000 NOK. That's Norwegian monies, by the way. So we are now almost at $2,100 raised right now. We're just about $400 or so, or something shy of the goal right there. I like that estimation math. I love it.
I gotta say, it is absolutely incredible right there. And hopefully we'll be able to hit that $2,500 fundraiser goal here very soon, folks. Very soon for none other than Nova Ukraine. I'm sure we're gonna hit it. I'm sure we're gonna hit it nice and easy. But with that in mind, folks, it is time for us to move on into the second segment of the stream where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. And so, Matthew, please take it away.
All right, so jumping into our questions and also all of our super chats that we have left, we're jumping right back into our first super chat here, which is actually our only one for right now, which goes to Squire Bode, I think it said. A huge shout out to Squire Bode for that $10 super chat. He said, this channel is the best thing on YouTube, Facebook, Netflix, etc. Oh, thank you, by the way.
Oh, wow.
He said, nothing comes close to y'all. And thanks for all the badass information and knowledge you guys share, and keep up the good fight from Texas.
And a big shout out to the folks down there in Texas. And I gotta thank you greatly for the kind words and helping this channel to keep on running. Even on a Sunday night fundraiser, we never expect to make a cent, a dime, or a dollar on Sunday nights. But since YouTube's created that little loophole where people can throw in super chats on Sunday night fundraisers, we've actually started to turn a little dime every single night. I think last Sunday, Matthew made like a whopping $6. Like it was really something. And I gotta say, a humongous thanks to everybody once again for enjoying the channel, especially you, Square Bodie, and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing a reality. And so it actually does appear, Matthew, that we have a couple of amazing folks that have just thrown in massive donations. Who are they?
And those top donors just now have been Yanara Sorkafor, who put in a $50 donation, and also Slim Jim, who just put in a $50 as well. A huge shout out to Slim Jim. Also, it looks like Moon just put in a 10 right there, by the way. Gabriel Swanton just put in a 1. We're calling them off rapid style right now because it looks like we are creeping toward that goal. We're currently almost at $2,200 raised, so about 300 or so creeping around. Also, by the way, I think I called off yours, Old Warrior. I think, but if I didn't, I'm going to give Old Warrior a second shout out. If I didn't call it off, or if I did, one way or the other, we're calling out Old Warrior again. He put in a 75 earlier, by the way, and he was also putting in that top donation earlier in the stream as well. A huge shout out to Old Warrior, along with their other top donors as well. So Anonymous just put in a 5 right now, by the way. Very, very nice indeed, and we're still creeping up toward that goal as we speak.
Hey, we're getting closer with every single donation. Right now we're at $2,164 raised, and I believe that is $336 away from the goal. $336 away. So we're halfway to where we started when we first brought this up a little while ago. I think it was $744 then, and now we're halfway to the fundraiser goal from there. So we're getting very close, people. We're getting very close here, and hopefully we'll be able to see that it surpasses it very soon. And Matthew, should we? I don't know.
I think it's time. I think it's time. I think it's time.
I think it is time.
There's a legendary thing that's on this channel that's called a tradition. It's a brand new word called tradition. It's something that you do over and over, but it's not like insanity, though, because you don't do it over and over expecting a different result. You do it over and over expecting the same result, which makes it a tradition instead of insanity. That's the difference. New word, tradition. But right now we have a tradition. It's called general order. It's called order. That's what it's called. A general order. Sit down, sir. I'll call him Dodgy Day. Sit down, sir. That's what we call it. A general order. Brand new word, general order. Enforcer, tell us more.
General order! If you have $5 and you're a member of the Lee Spring Army and you can support the fundraiser, throw it in right now. That is right now. That is a general order. We got to get this fundraiser over the goal. We're close. We're almost over the top. If we can just get $5 from the members of the LSA to this fundraiser that we're running tonight for Nova Ukraine, we will hit that $2,500 fundraiser goal. And it looks like we'll hopefully see that the general order goes in effect here very soon. It looks like it is. Holy moly!
Oh, we've hit the goal.
We hit the goal.
Hey!
Hey!
We smashed it. The goal has been smashed. I tell you what, we got no diddy. It's been smashed right now. It's at 25-13 right now. We are $13 above the goal. Literally 5 seconds after calling the general order, by the way. So that is a very nice sight, I must admit. Now it's going berserk, by the way. It's going well above 2,500 now. It looks like people are answering the general order.
Oh man, I gotta tell you, unbelievable, impressive, amazing, incredible. 5 seconds from the general order being declared to hitting the fundraiser goal. Can you believe that? Can you believe it? I can. I mean, we did it. And I gotta give a huge shout out to everybody in the Lee Spring Army who is supporting the fundraiser outside the general order and during the general order, because we've been able to surpass another fundraiser goal again here on this Sunday. We've now reached $2.6 thousand raised out of the $2.5 thousand goal. Absolutely incredible right there. And a big shout out to each and every single one of y'all who is currently supporting the fundraiser due to the general order and everyone else who supported so far. So humongous thanks to y'all so much once again. And with that, it is time for us to call out a couple of more of the top donors that just came in during the amazing general order that was just called. And to get a couple of them here really quickly, just to make sure that we shout them out. Yanara Sorkafor threw in another 50 Canadian, Espen Turgenhausen threw in another 2,000 Norwegian krona. We also saw that, let's see, V. Ripperoni threw in 160 Swedish krona. And let's see here, anyone else with anything over 50? Not at the moment. So those were all the folks who had supported the top donors of the fundraiser night, and an absolutely amazing thing. And so with that, it's time for us in y'all's honor to get into some questions that y'all thrown in tonight. And so Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so it's now time to see what the audience had to say and the questions they had about all the crazy events that broke out today on a Sunday. It seems like Sunday these days is always the day it goes down, oddly enough. But jumping right into our Morse code first, tonight we had Paul, Kevin, Mason, Joni, Norm, Arabelle, Heroy Fluffness, Kush, Koteric, Sire, and Brian. They said the Morse code said goodbye, Crimea. Russia will never be missed there, and I heard they are a little thirsty. LTLSA.
And that's the sound of money. Y'all get the dent on the nail. That's the Morse code mention of the night. I get to congratulate y'all greatly on getting that correct. Time and time again, y'all are always getting it correct. Always. And it's always incredible to know that the Lee Springer Signal Corps is able to get out that Morse code message for everybody in the LSA. And so a humongous thanks to y'all once again for that. A huge thanks to y'all. And with that, we are on and into the questions. What do we got?
All right. And also, by the way, if you have a question for us, right now I have approximately 10 live chats in the spreadsheet right now. So we'll probably be able to get some more than 10 of them. So if you have a question for us, tag at It's Enforcer Matt in the live chat and put your question with it, and I'll add it to the spreadsheet. I can't guarantee we'll get to all of them if a whole bunch start coming in, but we'll get to a good chunk of them here very, very soon. But our first one is going to go to none other than Old Warrior, who said, is Ukraine surprised by their recent successes, or are they just that good?
I think they're just that good these days. I don't think any of them are really all that surprising to the Ukrainians because they've gotten very close to doing these sorts of strikes before, and it's just that now they're succeeding. So I would say, honestly, I think they're probably just that good. They've been working incredibly long over the years on making their drones longer range, getting them produced in larger numbers to overwhelm Russian air defenses, to be able to make the drones carry larger explosive ordnances to inflict more damage on the targets that they hit. And generally, I would just say that it's that they've gotten their drone forces to be this good that they're able to see these kinds of damages being inflicted on the Russians. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we're on the next one.
And I saw a good question come in right now. This one is from Victor. And Victor said, why is it okay for Ukraine to bomb Russian oil, but it's not okay for America to bomb Iran's oil?
That's an interesting question, Victor. An interesting question here. The reason being is that when Ukraine bombs Russian oil, they're doing what the Russians have already done back to Ukraine. So it's just being reciprocal to level the playing field. On the other hand, with Iran, if we bomb their oil, like say on Karg Island, we make the drinking water for every one of our allies in the Gulf regions completely unusable. And also on top of that, it doesn't achieve any larger strategic aim. We don't need to economically destroy Iran to win a war against Iran. Holy moly, Alaros just threw into 333. Holy moly! That's unbelievable.
Dang, look at that. And also Anonymous put in a 100 too.
And that is insane. A huge shout out to y'all, by the way. I think the fundraiser's up. It's up to $3,079. That is crazy. We actually have blown well past the fundraiser goal at this point. A big shout out to everybody for doing that. But getting back to the question here, it doesn't achieve any strategic objectives for us to bomb Karg Island because we don't need to defeat the Iranians economically to defeat them. We can defeat them militarily if we fought the war properly with a proper strategy. And on the flip side, we also make all of the drinking water, which is the sea water that all of these Middle Eastern countries desalinate to use as drinking water, completely unusable because of how toxic it's going to become from the oil slicks that will exist on basically the entirety of the Persian Gulf. So that's generally one of the reasons why it's not okay for the U.S. to bomb Iranian oil, while on the other hand it is okay for the Ukrainians. Now, if the Iranians started to attack Saudi Arabia's oil infrastructure, and then Saudi Arabia decided on its own that it was going to bomb Iran's oil infrastructure, that enters the same sort of a ballpark as Ukraine. But us coming in as a superior military force against the Iranians, and generally needing to win and fight the war in a very short amount of time, conducting damage that would cause economic calamities in the next 4 years is generally pointless because our war goals and also war would most likely only last a couple of months if we're talking about this without any hindsight in 2020, knowing how it went with how their war plan was executed against the Iranians and how poorly it performed.
Yeah.
So I hope that does address that well. And do you have anything to add there?
I would actually see it a little bit differently, actually. The reason why I think it's acceptable under the rules of war for Ukraine to strike Russian oil is because the Ukrainians are engaged in a ground war with the Russians. That's why I see it being acceptable, because in order for the Russians to wage a successful ground war on the Ukrainians, they have to have fuel and they have to refine oil to get that fuel to be able to operate their war. The Russian military is sucking a ton of fuel out of the Russian fuel economy to keep the war going, so it could easily be argued that the oil industry inside of Russia is a military complex. It could be easily argued that. Now, on the Iran situation, that's different. The U.S. is not locked into ground conflict with Iran, so the fuel is not such a big deal when it comes to the Iranian conflict because it's mainly an air war. It's a whole bunch of aircraft going in on the U.S. side and they're hitting different targets. But it's not really, it's not really hinging on fuel. That's not really a main aspect here. So that's the main difference I see.
Interesting. So I actually think that we look at that in different ways, but I'd say that we're both generally right, just taking different angles on it. But with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Marks. He said, a non-Ukraine question. Have you read on Xi Jinping thought?
I haven't really read it directly. I know some of the core tenets of Jinpingism, if we want to call it that, or Xiism, whichever way you want to say it. I know some of the core tenets, but I've never really read heavily on Xi Jinping thought as a specific ideological framework. Like I know some of the base elements of it, but the intricacies of it, I've never really cared to study all too much. Because basically all that it is trying to create China as a global superpower that is comparable to the United States or outdoes the United States. That's basically the whole premise of Xiism, and that's why they've been working on the One Belt, One Road initiative and trying to create their own independent sphere of influence in the Indian Ocean to be able to create an economic bubble for themselves, kind of like we have over here in the United States and the Western world, and also trying to build up the Chinese military to be able to achieve Chinese nationalist ambitions and to also be able to power project globally, much like we do here in the States. So that's generally some of the core tenets of their foreign policy and how it's implemented, but the actual intricate depths I wouldn't know. So big thanks to your support. I hope that has addressed that well, and with that, we're on the next one.
I also have here a question from none other than the Secret Vault. He said, do y'all think if Iran got a nuke that they would use it on Israel?
Honestly, I would say yeah, but at the same time, though, they also have a pretty decent chance of not using it on anybody at all and using it for deterrence. Nuclear weapons are best suited for deterrence, really only. They're never really meant to be used, at least in the modern form that they're used strategically. They're always meant to be a deterrent. Can you topple the Islamic regime if they're going to nuke Saudi Arabia? That's more so what the nuclear weapon is for, rather than we made it, so we're finally going to blow up these people we don't like. Because the North Koreans hate us here in the United States of America, and they have dozens of nuclear weapons at this point, yet they'll never fire them at us because the nuclear weapons are really more so a deterrent than an active offensive weapon. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. But I would say, however, on the flip side, though, The Iranians are more likely to use it than anybody else. Their government is wildly unstable. It's sitting on top of a house of cards, even just from the internal domestic situation in Iran. And for that reason, they would definitely be more likely to use it than anybody else. But I would think that they probably wouldn't be guaranteed to use it because that would be an instant death sentence. The Israelis have nuclear weapons as well that they would lob right back into Iran. And regardless whether they're willing to say openly that they're wanting to be martyred, most of them don't want to die. So I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, moving on to our next question here. This one is going to go to none other than Activista LSA, who said, remember years ago how everyone doubted that Ukraine could ever go after Crimea, LOL. I remember that. And there's people still now that say that. I will say there is a caveat to it. The people that were saying that it's not possible to go invade Crimea, I would tend to agree with them. Like right now, it's not really physically possible for Ukraine to invade Crimea, like with a proper landing force. They can do special forces raids on the coast and send people in to sabotage the Russian infrastructure, but they can't do a full-on invasion. That's just simply not physically possible. But I mean, there were people that doubted Ukraine could do anything to isolate Crimea. I would say they've been proven definitely wrong in these recent 2 weeks. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would agree too. I think it's kind of crazy. I remember I was saying for a while way back in the day, like back in 2023, I said I don't really think it's going to be possible for them to get back down there right now, especially after the summer offensive of 2023 ended in a defeat largely for the Ukrainians because they weren't able to break through the Russian lines like they intended. So I said, I don't think they're ever going to make it to Crimea. But a lot has changed since then. A lot of their technologies have developed, especially their drone warfare capabilities, and also the Russian strategic position as a whole for their country has changed a great deal as well, and it's made it entirely possible to be able to isolate Crimea now. But I mean, we've kind of been watching that on the channel for a good minute, but there are still a lot of people out there who say that there is no way for the Ukrainians to turn the war around and win it. And to those people, I'd say, like, I don't mean to always, like, cut down any group that opposes us in terms of what we think, but they're kind of full of shit, because they've been saying that the Russians are going to whip out the fine China any day now for, like, 4 years, as far as, like, their fighting forces go, and they never have, because they used them literally at the beginning, and they just keep saying it because they like the Russians for some reason or another. They built the Russians up into, like, these grand old people in their head, so they don't want to admit that they've walked into basically what is a death killing field, and they're getting wiped out left and right down there, and there's really no chance in hell of them recovering and winning the war at this point, and those people just don't want to admit it. But I hope that has addressed that the best I can, at least from what I know, and with that, we're on the next one.
And our next one here is going to go to Little by Little More. And they said, does this situation with the Crimea, with the Russians fleeing the Isle of Crimea, does that make them refugees? Now, that is an interesting question, actually, because, there's a distinction here that we have to remember. Putin refuses to call this a war, so technically it's a special military operation that Putin's calling this right here. So if Russia's not declaring a state of war with Ukraine, does this make these, Russian civilians in Crimea, refugees of war? If it's not really a war, that's the strange thing about it. So I don't know. That's an interesting concept right there. Enforcer, what even like qualifies somebody as a war refugee?
I mean, they probably wouldn't end up being war refugees. I don't think they were asking like war refugees. I think they were just asking in general if they were refugees. Like if I'm looking at the wordage of the question here, it says, does that make the Russians fleeing Crimea refugees? So it doesn't look like they're saying war refugees. Refugees can be created by a wide variety of different elements. Political persecution is one of them. So like say, for example, if you're from Syria, then you're a Christian and ISIS takes over Western Syria and they're executing Christians and you flee the area. Technically, you're a political refugee trying to avoid political persecution by ISIS. If there was, say, some sort of a natural disaster, like, say, a famine hit Russia and they were starving for food and they packed up and just started to flee by the millions out of Russia, those would technically be environmental refugees. And then war refugees would be ones fleeing from what is becoming a frontline area on an active battlefield. So these would really more so be, if anything, environmental refugees, because it's the lack of resources, I guess, that's leading them to flee if they ever do become them.
Well, actually, that actually is not the legal definition of a refugee. A refugee is someone who's been forced to flee his or her country because of persecution, war, or violence. So the environmental thing actually does not qualify as a refugee. It's actually a legal status, by the way. Like a refugee, like some people, call themselves refugees, but it's actually a legal terminology, and you have certain rights as a refugee and under international law. So it's a very specific definition, and it's over just persecution, war, or violence. So in this case, I mean, there's really no distinction between like a war refugee or any other type of refugee. You're either a refugee or you're not. I would say under this current circumstance, I mean, technically by the international definition, the people in Crimea would be a refugee because at the minimum, there's violence at the minimum because there's a war going on. So I guess it really wouldn't matter if Putin's calling it a war or a special military operation under that definition.
Yeah, I would say so, but generally there will definitely be a lot of refugees because they'll mostly be packing up and trying to leave the area of Crimea. And I guess technically they're trying to flee violence because the Ukrainians are, blowing up fuel refineries and the supply lines. So I guess that would make them refugees by that definition as a legal status. But that would be my 2 cents on it, knowing what I know about it. So with that, we're on the next one.
And our next one here goes to I'm D. Stevenson, who said, I understand the bridge is closed to cars, but why don't the Russians just walk across the bridge? Is that closed as well?
Oh, it's long. The Kerch Bridge is like 50 miles long, I believe, from
Oh,
end to end, if I'm not mistaken.
damn, really? Like, is it really 50
Well,
miles?
let me pull that up. I want to make sure. I read that somewhere before. Crimean Bridge length. So the Crimean Bridge is actually, 12 miles long. I don't know where I heard
Oh,
50
dang.
from. Like, man,
I was about to say, man, 50 miles, that might be the longest bridge in the world.
I was looking at that. I was like, there's no way in hell that this thing is 50. Like, by the way, I have to tell you where I got that from, like, not to, like, throw the blame off, but it was from the foreign exchange student in high school that was from Ukraine. I asked him about the bridge. He's like, yeah, it's 50 miles long. I was like, really? I was like, that's kind of wild, but it's not. It's 12. But it's a 12-mile long bridge. And, I mean, most physically fit people would be able to deal with that. But, say you're an elderly person or a child, would you really be able to deal with walking 12 miles across the bridge? And then once you make it to the other side, it's not like there's immediately transportation in life. There's a huge fuel shortage going on the other side of the strait. So they go across the bridge, and then I guess they just have to keep legging it until they find something that can take them back home. So I would honestly tell you, they could. I mean, it's 12 miles. It's not like insanely long or anything like that. But I still think that would really be, well, I guess it'd be better than starving to death. So yeah, I mean, I guess they could, come to think of it. And also, let me go pull this up really quickly. Longest bridge in the world. It is the Danyang Kunshan Grand Bridge in China, which is 102 miles long. Where is that bridge? Let me type that in. The Danyang Kunshan. Let's see.
There it is.
My God, that bridge is long. Look at that thing. Wait, is this it? Yeah, that's it. So it's a railway bridge. Oh, okay. Well, that doesn't really make any sense because they're showing a road bridge here in some of these pictures. Something ain't adding up here. Something ain't adding up. But it looks like it might be a railroad or a road bridge. I'm very confused at this point. I can't even tell you. Oh, wait a minute. Is that it under construction? I'm very confused at this point. I'm confused as hell as to which
It's an
one is...
ancient Chinese secret.
Like, I don't know. Like, I can't even figure out where the hell this damn bridge is.
Oh, man.
But apparently it leads into Shanghai. That's one thing that we can confirm here is that apparently it leads into Shanghai. But outside of that, it's a damn mystery as to what's going on with it. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to none other than Howard Mendelson. He said, is it to Ukraine's advantage to have all those Russians in Crimea, or should the Ukrainians help evacuate them?
In a bit of a morbid sense, it's kind of a bit of a benefit because they're a supply drain. They have to eat, they have to drink, so they're, depleting supplies from the Russian military. But from a humanitarian standpoint, it's not a good position. These people are going to be in a very dangerous and vulnerable position to starve to death or to die of thirst. So it would be beneficial to get them out of there. But if the Russian government isn't willing to get them out of there, then they're kind of on their own. And also, as far as it works for Ukraine, Ukraine doesn't actively have to help out. If a humanitarian crisis happens on Russian territory, and many people inside of Crimea start to die from a result of that, It's really more so a failing of the Russian Federation, as this generally would fall under the kind of concept, even though the Russians will blame Ukraine for it, of like a natural disaster. Like, say, like, like a hurricane hits Louisiana. Well, the U.S. really can't blame China for climate change and then demand that they come over and help out with the recovery of, say, like a hurricane relief effort in Louisiana or somewhere else. And so this would kind of be entirely on the country that has sovereign rights over the territory or claims sovereign rights over the territory, which would be Russia, to try and get these people out. So it would really be best, at least at this point, to leave it entirely to the Russians, because no matter what, it's going to be a significant supply drain, either for the civilians to stay there or for them to try and get the people out, so that way it doesn't end up becoming an absolute humanitarian disaster. So I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we're on the next one.
And our next question here goes to Marie. And Marie said, who will get their water problems corrected first? Will it be Tehran or Crimea in LSA?
At this point, probably Tehran. Like, I have a feeling it'd probably be them over Crimea at this point, because Crimea largely requires a lot of mechanical solutions to be able to get their water. Tehran could have a nice rainstorm come through, and their water situation will have a bit of a slight reprieve. Crimea, however, there's just no reprieve even if the rains do come, because there's really nowhere to keep the rainwater inside of Crimea once it falls. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what I know. And with that, we're on the next one.
We also have a question here from Judy from the live chat who said, is China helping Russia with arms?
Yes, they help out with drones. We know that China is actually manufacturing Shaheds for Russia. We saw that some footage was actually saved on one of the drones from Shenzhen, China, showing that it was actually under construction in a factory there. So the Chinese do help out with arms. It's just not directly, and they also do not provide any conventional weapon systems or orthodox weapon systems like tanks, APCs, or small arms and such things that would directly trace right back to China. So I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we're on the next one.
We also have a question from TV Killed Radio, who said, think it would be effective if they added chaff and flares to drones to evade the city defenses.
Not quite, because it would probably take a lot of money to equip those to those drones, and the drones are so inexpensive that if they do get blown up, it's not really that big of a loss. So I'd say it would help, but does the system really require that with how expensive it is? And not really. It'd be cheaper to just build a whole new drone than to put chaff and flares on a current one. And also, you'd have to have detection systems and whatnot to be able to figure out if it's getting locked on, so that way they can use the chaff and flares when necessary, instead of just burning through them in the first couple of minutes without it even being locked onto. So I would say no, really, just because of how cheap and inexpensive they are. But with that, we're on the next one.
And our next one goes to TS Actual, who said, what is the Russian social media and news reporting on the plight of Crimea? It's really honestly, it's really been kind of vague, like what they've been saying about it. Like, it's been very, very silent. Like, we have not heard any statements from Putin directly about the situation. He has been completely silent. He's hiding away in the bunker and won't come out to say anything. He keeps sending out Peskov, the Kremlin spokesperson, who also is known as the Rat, to everybody here on the channel. He keeps sending him out, and the last thing Peskov said is, if you want a happy life, don't look at the attack footage of Russia, go look at the attack footage of Ukraine. So that doesn't sound very promising. And then also, we're hearing that the governor in Crimea is saying that people should simply get ready not to have gasoline and simply, stay calm. So honestly, not a whole bunch of messaging going on for the most part, at least on official channels. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would agree. I haven't really seen anything on official channels to really say that it's a dire emergency. If anything, as usual, the Russians are severely downplaying the failures that they're having right now in Crimea and the land bridge. So with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on the next one.
We also have a question here from Y Hero, who said, what are y'all's thoughts on the U.S. telling South Korea it's time to deal with North Korea nukes?
I didn't hear about that today. Matthew, did you hear about that?
I vaguely heard something about it. I think it sounded so unrealistic, I kind of just like brushed it off a little bit. I remember hearing something about South Korea saying that they wanted to deal with North Korea or something like that. I don't think it was the top leadership, though. I think it was some legislators or something in South Korea, which generally, for the most part, is mostly meaningless. I might be mistaken, but if South Korea did say it, let's just address it hypothetically. If they said something like that, and it was, let's say, a top leader, like a president or something like that, I mean, what are they expecting to do? Like, get in a nuclear exchange with North Korea? It's like there's nothing they can do about that anyway.
Yeah, I mean, like, honestly, it's a little hard to deal with the nuclear armed country. So I would say I didn't really hear about that. And even if that was brought up, it would generally be an unrealistic ambition. So with that, I hope we've addressed that well. And it looks like we are on to the third to last question of the night.
Oh, really?
Unless I'm counting them wrong. Actually, it looks like I'm counting them wrong. So with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Scott Baldwin, who said, I saw some reports today that the Belarus president said they will turn off the MTS repeaters, and any truth to it?
I didn't hear about that today. Did you hear about that, Matthew?
No, I haven't heard anything about that personally either. Also, like, this situation is so serious, unless Lukashenko himself comes out and make a public statement about it, or somehow Zelensky confirms that there's been a statement, I wouldn't take any side reports about that as fact, because this is literally as serious as a war is going to start in a couple of days, unless Lukashenko backs off. So I'm waiting for an official statement personally.
Yeah, I'll be waiting for an official statement as well because I didn't hear anything about that today. So I'd have to say I don't think that happened, unfortunately. So with that, we're on the next one.
We also have a question from Blessed. They said, how is Russia likely to respond? Withdraw from Ukraine, double down, launch attacks against Kyiv, or negotiate the end of the war?
I would say that they're probably just going to double down. That's usually what they do. They just double down and try and dig in even further and just try and pretend like nothing's wrong and keep the war going just through sheer willpower. But eventually that's going to end up collapsing. The sheer willpower can't keep them going forever. And it's certainly not going to be able to keep them going when they don't have food or water in Crimea or any ammunition or fuel to work with. So I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to, I believe this is the third to last question of the night.
All right, so this one here goes to King Tilly, who said, here's a question. It appears to be a philosophical one. He said, can morality be kept in war? Is it a liability? And is doing the wrong thing for the right reason still doing the wrong thing? And that's a complicated question right there. Everybody has a different definition of morality and what that actually means. Some people think morality is being a bastard, and some people think morality is being a good person. It's really subjective. You would think it would be objective, but it's really not these days. I would say, in my personal opinion, I don't really. I'll be honest. That is a very complicated one to answer. And for sure, while I think about my answer, what do you think?
I would say that morality is a liability, but morality comes with a civilized society for the larger part. We could be, barbarians. We could be uncivilized people. We could go around and butcher everybody that we run into. Like when we invade Afghanistan, we just wipe out anyone we run into, regardless of who they are or, what group they are, men, women, and children. But the thing about that is that that is a barbaric act. And the United States of America is a civilized society. When you look in the United States of America, we have structured laws and systems that enforce civilization and society with some levels of morality. And so we have expectations of ethics here in the United States and morals that we live by on the by and large. And so when we take our citizens and we go and we have to wage war overseas, my idea is that regardless of how the enemy behaves, we generally should be trying to stay on the straight and level morally as best we can as to the morals we live by here on the home front, because that's what defines an American. Like an American doesn't just get angry, roll into town and then wipe out 100 people when they're unhappy, and we shouldn't be doing that in a war either, unless if it's absolutely necessary to the objectives of continuing a war. Deaths should be prevented as much as possible. And if we go through the whole morality of it and everything else as to what created the Geneva Convention was the idea that in civilized European nations, it is completely uncalled for them to butcher and massacre each other like dogs and animals, considering that they're all civilized peoples. And considering that they're all civilized peoples, they should be able to agree to some set standards and basis of morality to even exercise during war. So I would say that in my opinion, that generally is what I guess you could say morality is to me as far as what war should be, and I think that that should be kept in a war, although it is a liability. And I would say that sometimes doing the wrong thing for the right reasons is still wrong. Like if we're saying, well, if we wipe out this whole city of innocent Iranian people, we could end up winning the war. does the ends justify the means? And I would say that the ends do not justify the means in those sorts of situations. So we should always be trying to follow our morality as much as we can, and we tried to codify the morality in the Geneva Convention. So I hope that does address it the best I can. And Matthew, what would your answer to that be?
So, after thinking about it and hearing your answer right there, I would say the best way I could describe it is this. War will never be moral. It never will, because at the heart of war is killing, and I think reasonable people would agree that killing is immoral. But in a war, though, assuming it's a just war for whatever that means, assuming it's a just war, you're carrying that out in self-defense, hopefully. So I think war is a necessary evil. War will always be evil. It'll never be moral, no matter what the circumstances are. But sometimes, though, because we live in a real world, you have to defend yourself. And sometimes that means going to war, and then obviously war leads to the inevitable every single time. So I don't really think war could ever be called moral in any sense. I don't think it could be. Like, for example, if you have to defend yourself, let's say you go to a gas station late at night, someone walks up to you and puts a gun to you and says, "Let me have that car, I'm going to get you." And then they're like, "Well, I'm going to get you anyway." And then you pull out a gun and you defend yourself against that person. I mean, technically, is it moral to have to kill somebody in self-defense? That's arguable. I mean, killing is
I'd say
not right,
yeah.
really. Well, is it? I wouldn't say it's moral. I mean, it's justified, but I don't know about calling it moral.
Well, I mean,
You know,
someone
it's a,
someone someone values your life so little they're willing to kill you, so you have to kill in your own self defense. I mean, I don't really think anyone's going to argue, oh well, the morality isn't there. You should have let that guy kill you, and commit the sin, and then hop in the car and drive off as well and get the fruits of his sin as well. It's like I don't think anyone would really argue that one.
I don't know. Like, it depends. I mean, it depends on what you define as morality, though. Because, I mean, some people use religion to define morality. Like, for example, if you use the Bible, you look at the Ten Commandments and it says, "Thou shalt not kill," which is pretty straightforward. So it doesn't really say under self-defense is okay, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's just presumed you'll get forgiveness for it if you have to do it under self-defense, I would assume. So I don't think killing's ever moral, but sometimes it's justified if it's in self-defense. And I would say war comes under that self-defense umbrella.
Let's see here. I'm trying to see if I can get the. Let's see here. Yeah, it does just say directly, "Thou shalt not kill," at least in the King James version. I believe some other ones
That's if
have.
you're a That's if you're a Christian too. I mean, it depends on what system of morals you're looking at. Like, everybody's got a different one. Like, nobody has the same system of morals. Some people think morality is straightforward. It's really not, depending on who you ask.
But I would say generally, I think most people are saying this in the chat as well. It's morally justifiable to defend oneself against an imminent threat of death. Like I don't really think anybody's ever going to say that that's possibly immoral because of self-preservation against an imminent threat. I don't really think I've ever heard anyone argue that that's an immoral concept. I mean, in most countries in the world, you usually have a legal defense, except for in some wild cases to kill someone if you have to be able to defend yourself against them imminently trying to kill you. Because
Would
self-preservation
you
is usually
say?
protected under law in any country.
Let's see here. Hold on a second. Let me pull something up to verify real quick. Let me pull this up. Which car was invaded over mid east? Let's see here. Trying to get some answers here. Okay, so when we went to the Middle East as the United States, because we were told that there was a country in the Middle East that had weapons of mass destruction. And we went there, and the U.S., and obviously in war, a lot of killings involved with it. The U.S. went there and wiped a whole bunch of people out under the premise that we were defending ourselves against a country with weapons of mass destruction. And then we later found out that was actually a lie, that wasn't true, and we went to war on a false basis. Under that scenario right there, I would not argue that that was moral whatsoever under that circumstance right there. Some people could view it as we went there, with good intentions, thinking that there was weapons of mass destruction. But I mean, it's very tricky because I mean, if you look at it from the Russian point of view, they claim that they're in Ukraine on the basis of self-defense because they believe that Ukraine was building, all their propaganda bullshit, biolabs. NATO was trying to invade Russia. They were encroaching on their borders. They were trying to do something to the Russian Federation. There's always a twisting and turning when it comes to what's considered self-defense and not. So that's why I say it can be justified. A war can be justified, but it's not going to be moral. That's my position.
I would disagree because what about World War II when the Japanese attacked us? It wasn't immoral to respond to the Japanese attacking the United States of America.
Well, it's not about the response, it's about what takes place after that. It's a lot of killing.
Well, yeah, but I mean, sometimes it's justified though, under moral pretext. Like let's put it in a much more simple, boiled down form. You're living as a caveman before recorded history, and you have like a handful of grain, and you have a wife and two kids living in this cave with you. The other Ooga Booga dude from the other cave, like 3 miles away, is going to show up with a spear in like 5 minutes, and he's going to impale you through the heart, kill you in the middle of the floor, take the handful of grain right out of your hand, and leave your wife and children to starve. Would it be morally justifiable, boiling war down to its most basic element from the Neolithic era, to kill that person who's invading your cave to steal your food and starve your family and kill you as well in that situation?
Yeah, but I think you're mixing up several different concepts though. Like I'm making a distinction between something being justified in reality versus it being moral or not. I mean, me personally, I'm Christian, so I abide or try to abide by the Ten Commandments, which it says thou shalt not kill. So in my system of morality, it would be immoral to have to do any killing whatsoever. But it could be justified though if you're under a situation where you have to defend yourself and your life's at risk. But it would still be immoral under the Ten Commandments. So I mean, that's why I think we're getting mixed up on here. There's situations in war where you have to fight war, whether or not you think it's good or not, because your life's on the line. If you don't fight the war, then the enemy's going to kill you. So you have to defend yourself. But it's not moral. Like war, that's why they say war is a necessary evil, because war's not good, it's evil, but sometimes it's necessary to defend yourself.
But the thing about that, though, is that what you're saying is that it's wrong to kill morally, but it's sometimes justifiable. In this scenario that I'm giving, which is basically a nation boiled down to its most simple concept, a family unit versus another, and a nation is just made up of millions of family units that operate in an organized system like a large family in reality, isn't protecting the innocents, your helpless wife and children, a moral justification to kill this invader and stop them from stealing your grain and then leaving your wife and children who are helpless and innocent to starve to death?
Well, I mean,
I mean, that would be
would it be
morally
justified to
justified.
protect? I mean, yeah, it would be justified, but not, but adding the word morally to that's where I disagree.
So you're saying that it'd be moral to not do anything and let them starve to death? Like,
Yeah, but
I'm trying to figure it out.
remember though, morality is a set of beliefs and standards that you abide by. Which, if you're religious, that's typically your religion. Which for me is Christianity, and it's the Ten Commandments. So it says, "Thou shalt not kill." So any type of killing violates the Ten Commandments. It's as straightforward as it is. Now, if it's justified, that's a whole different debate. Now, in reality, if somebody was like trying to, take you out or something like that, and they're trying to take shots at you, obviously I'm going to defend you with whatever means I have at my disposal. That's just what I have to do. I also have to hope I get forgiven for it later. But in the reality, you have to defend yourself. I mean, it might be justified, but it's still not moral.
I don't know, man. Like, I would say that it's probably I think you're trying to divide justified and moral. If something is justified to do, just, then it usually is going to be moral, like punishing a thief. That would be a morally just thing to do in the realm of society. I don't really get what you're saying here because you're saying it's not moral. Like, if a country comes and attacks ours and kills thousands of innocent people, then I would say that it's a morally just war at that point to meld the two together to
But it's
return.
yeah. It's just not good. It's just I'm calling it morally justified. Like morally justified in war, which involves a whole bunch of killing, just doesn't sit right. Like that, just even the sound of that doesn't sit right. Because there's been a lot of people throughout history that are religious individuals that will go around saying, "Well, this is a morally just war," and they're turning it into like a religious crusade or something like that. They're like finding ways to like twist their own ideology to fit what they want to do, which is to wipe out a whole other group of people. Me personally, I'm not a pacifists, obviously. I would say both of our commentary here on the channel proves we're not pacifists. But I'm also not somebody either. It's just like, yeah, war and under any circumstance. I'm not that type of person either. But back to the argument, though, I would still say that the best way I can describe it, and I'm having a hard time putting it into words, I see a big difference between something being justified in reality versus something being moral. Like I see a difference between the two.
I don't really see a difference between the two because, I mean, if you take plenty of examples from our history, isn't the war against Nazi Germany a justified one? What were we supposed to do? Not go to war and let the Holocaust continue and let innocents be
I
killed in
mean,
the millions, just because we don't want to shed blood? It's justifiable, but it's like, isn't that moral to protect the innocents? And sometimes that requires us to go to war to protect if we're looking at it from the point of stopping the Holocaust rather than them declaring war on us, which is what really got us in the war in Europe. Wouldn't that be
but
a moral justification for the war?
Well, I mean, well, yeah, but like I'm saying though, there's a justification part of it, and then there's a morality side of it. I mean, I would certainly say going to help save the Jews that were being persecuted in the Holocaust, that was 100% something the U.S. needed to do. We had to go save them, and at the time, nobody really knew how bad it was, and then we found out later how bad it was, and then people were like, well, damn, we should have gotten involved sooner if we'd have known this was going on, how bad it was. But no, that was justified to go do that. That was in self-defense of others. It was justified in reality. But at the same time, though, look at it from this perspective. All these soldiers that fight wars are not the people that start the wars. For example, look at the Russia-Ukraine war. You have a whole bunch of Russian young men that are being grabbed up off the streets. They're being grabbed away from their mothers and fathers by sicko Putin, and they're being thrown into the meat grinder to die after the average of 2 weeks at the maximum. That's what the average Russian lives, is about 2 weeks on the front lines. Then they're dead and they're sent home in a box, or some of them aren't even sent home in a box. And some of those people are just young men that just wanted to live a normal life, but they got scraped up off the street and thrown into the war. Would you say it's moral to take that kid out?
Well, if he's on your land fighting in the war, I would say yeah. I mean, like, it's like you have to defend your nation. That guy is going to follow orders clearly, and we've already seen what they do in occupied territories. So I mean, there's a
I,
moral
I wouldn't
justification
say
to
it's
protect your
moral.
people and your family.
I wouldn't say it's moral. I would say it's a tragedy. Personally, I would think that's a pure tragedy. It's justified because the guy is being told to go and hurt your loved ones inside of Ukraine, so you have to defend your country. Ukraine has to defend themselves, but it's not moral. I mean, it's a whole bunch of killing of people that don't even really want to be there for the most part. So that's why I say it's evil. It's a necessary evil for Ukraine to defend themselves, but war is not something that I would consider to be ever morally justified. It's just something that might be justified in reality, but not moral.
But the thing about it is, though, is that you're saying, like, look at this poor guy. He got press ganged off of the streets into the Russian army. He's on your home territory, and it's a tragedy. So let's not wipe the guy out, like, because it's not moral. Like, off of my concept, if it's not moral, then you don't do it. So let's not wipe him out. So let's let him walk into Dnipro and have his way with any woman in the street that he wants, and just violate people, steal from them, and conduct horrific acts, because the poor guy is in a tragic situation. And it's like, it doesn't really make
Well,
a
I
lot of
didn't say
sense because,
that.
well, yeah, but at the same time, though, there's got to be a moral line of this is a justified thing to do or not at a basic level boiled down. Because it's a tragedy that the guy's there, but also the guy's probably acting like a bastard in the occupied territories. I mean, we generally get enough proof to prove that most of them are. So if we say it's not really moral to stop this guy from, following his orders and pushing deeper into Ukraine, then he's going to conduct atrocities against innocents that, as a soldier of the armed forces of Ukraine, that is your duty to protect. So I'd say that we're kind of at an impasse on this, but I'd say that generally morality does exist in war. That's why we have the Geneva Convention, and I would say that generally is something that we should follow. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
And moving on from that right there, and honestly, that one was starting to loop there for a minute. But this one here goes to Game Theory, who put in a $10 super chat, by the way, and a big shout to you, Game Theory, for that support. And Game Theory said, in 1930, a fake doctor allegedly ran for Kansas governor after convincing thousands of men to get goat gland implants. The only thing the procedure actually enlarged was a bank account, allegedly.
That's crazy. I never heard of that. Actually, that's pretty wild. But I do have to thank you for the support of this channel to keep running. A very interesting historical fact. I've never heard that one before. That's news to me. But with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one actually, you said, what, second to last, you say?
Yes.
So this one right here goes to none other than, let's see here, King Tilly. I forgot to put a red mark on that one. That was the question about morality right there. King Tilly, you started a huge discussion right there. But our next one goes to Josh from New Jersey, and Josh said, "Do you think Ukraine will keep the Kerch bridge up so there's a retreat route?"
I don't think so. I think the Ukrainians are going to be looking to see that the Russian forces inside of Crimea most likely surrender due to a lack of supplies and a lack of a way out. And so cutting off the Crimean bridge will probably be the way they do that. I might be wrong. They might keep it open, but considering that the railway bridge doesn't appear to be getting used either, the Ukrainians might just completely destroy all routes in and out of the peninsula and leave the Russians in Crimea with two options. Either they can die fighting or they can surrender. And that would be basically all they have left as their choices. But with that, I hope that has addressed that well. And we are on to the final question of the night. And so who is the last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And this one right here is going to go to none other than TS Actual, who said, "Would Putin use the breakdown in Crimea and consider it a part of Russia and an affront to the sovereignty of Russia and escalate on that basis?"
I would say, yeah, I mean, escalate, definitely. I would say they definitely escalate, but I would say how far, it probably wouldn't be that much farther than we're seeing right now. They probably escalate their drone and missile attacks against Ukraine. But outside of that, I don't really see them doing much more than that. There's not really much of a way for them to escalate farther rather than rhetoric, and maybe slightly more uses of conventional arms. But outside of that, I don't really think they'll be escalating to, say, like nuclear weapons usage or anything along those lines. So with that, I hope I've addressed that well, and we've reached the end of tonight's stream. And I gotta say, folks, one hell of a show, because I did this entire thing without a drop of coffee tonight, which was actually pretty hard. Hopefully it didn't come through on the microphone. But I thank you all once again for watching tonight. We've been able to see that $3,239 have been raised for Nova Ukraini. Holy moly! And it is absolutely amazing and incredible to know that so many people have been supporting this fundraiser tonight and helping out the folks over in Ukraine. I'd have to say a huge thanks to all of y'all so much once again for watching, and we will see you all on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 48 hours of the news from around the world. And if there is a short war video to be made tomorrow, I'll be the one making that short war video. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, Heram Slava, long live the Lead Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, a big shout out to the, well, wow, 160,000 plus people that were here by the end of the stream tonight. We're very appreciative for all those people being here and being here once again on a Sunday night fundraiser where so much money was raised once again for the charity of the night, which was Nova Ukraine. And we genuinely appreciate all of you very much for that as well. And we hope to see you all on Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern for the next Night of the War News stream, and maybe tomorrow for a short war video if there is enough news to cover midday. But in the meantime, though, hopefully nothing happens, in the middle of the day tomorrow, because Monday is our off day. It's our one day of the week that we get off, and hopefully there's nothing happen that requires an emergency stream tomorrow, because that would suck, because we haven't got our Mondays off for like normal, like for a while now at this point. So we hope to see you all on Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern. But in the meantime, though, of course, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and good night.